Chapter 22. Meng Qi was completely surprised. As calm and composed as she was, the hand holding the teacup trembled slightly. Her original plan was to exchange 12 second-grade Northern Dark Dan for 6 or 700 6th-grade Lingstones. It was enough to buy the herbs she was going to use to try and cure the jackdaw grass poison. She hadn't thought that large sects were different. They were rich and spent a lot of money. This was something that a little Lianqi Xiuzhe like her could not imagine. Even Xue Jinwen was stunned for a moment. But she quickly reacted. It was just like when she had first seen the first-grade Clear Wind Dan. At the time, if she had to spend 26th-grade Lingstones to buy a first-grade Clear Wind Dan, she definitely would have been willing. For disciples of good birth like them, as long as the Lingstones were well spent, it was fine. If she could really find something, the sect might reward her greatly. Then it would not be a matter of a few Lingstones, but treasures of the world, medical books, spells, and even a chance to practice in the secret places of the sect. These people probably had similar thoughts as her. Xue Jinwen's lips rose and showed a faint smile. She couldn't help but turn to look at Meng Qi. The other's expression finally showed some surprise. Her eyes were much brighter than before. They were sparkling and seemed to have some of the childishness of a young girl. Meng Qi was currently pondering. In the blink of an eye, the price of the Northern Dark Dan had been raised to 37th-grade Lingstones. She could guarantee that she was the richest person in Clear Wind Valley, even richer than the sect leader. And this time, she should be able to buy many of the herbs she needed. So good. Meng Qi turned and met Xue Jinwen's gaze. She couldn't help but smile at this older sister. Many thanks to Xue Jie for helping. This is what I should do. Xue Jinwen poured another cup of tea for Meng Qi. In that moment, she rejoiced at her sudden curiosity. Lin Mo, that idiot, only knew how to be calculative over a few spirit stones and even haggled with Meng Qi. The pills were no longer important. The beautiful girl in front of him was the real treasure. By the way, Xue Jinwen took out a scroll from her storage bag. I heard that you were looking for records related to jackdaw grass. I have a compendium of herbs from the North Realm. As she spoke, she handed the scroll in her hand to Meng Qi. It's useless for me to keep it with me. You can leave a divine sense imprint on it, and I'll send it to you from the Outland Courier Station. Thank you, Sister Xue. Meng Qi obviously wanted it, but he was a little embarrassed. Then I'll give you some more Dark North pills. No need, no need. Xue Jinwen waved her hand generously. This thing isn't worth much, and it's not very useful to me. 3 Dark North pills are enough. She looked at Meng Qi with a smile. From the looks of it, I'm afraid this Dark North pill will be sold for a high price today. It couldn't be considered a sky-high price. However, compared to a second-grade pill, the current price was definitely considered high. Moreover, Xue Jinwen couldn't figure out the girl's background. The first time, she used a first-grade Clear Breeze pill to shock her and Xiong Linmo. The second time, she used a second-grade Dark North pill to knock open the door of the Xian auction house. She left a deep impression on the Xiuzhe here. Next time, she would surprise her even more. Xue Jinwen was not surprised. Thank you, sister. Meng Qi left his imprint on the bamboo scroll as he was told. She narrowed her eyes and looked at the small, warm, and even a little yellow bamboo scroll. I can't tell sister the refining method. If sister needs a first-grade or second-grade pill, I can refine some for you. Meng Qi thought about it and said. She wouldn't be as wary of Xue Jinwen as she was of Chu Tianfeng and Su Junmo. However, it was better not to owe her too much karma. So it's like this. Xue Jinwen looked at Meng Qi's clear eyes, and her heart moved slightly. This girl was always calm and indifferent, her background must be extraordinary. First-grade or second-grade pill, she thought and asked, is seasonal rain pill okay? All right. Meng Qi nodded. Unlike Dark North pill that recovered Ling energy, seasonal rain pill was used to stop bleeding. This was a very common kind of pill, and was also divided into 9 grades. Xue Jinwen actually had other questions she wanted to ask. Why were they all first-grade and second-grade pills? If what was being auctioned today was not second-grade Dark North pill, but 4th grade or even 5th grade. The entire Xian auction house would go crazy. But she also knew that this should be Meng Qi's secret. The other said that she could only make second-grade pills. She didn't know if she was being modest, or if such a special pill could only be made into second-grade pills. Xue Jinwen smiled again. Then sister will thank my first. As they talked, the price in the auction house continued to rise. In 15 minutes, it went from 37th grade lingstones to 157th grade lingstones. At this price, there were fewer people bidding. Just as Xue Jinwen said, it was only second-grade Dark North pill. If it was 4th grade or 5th grade, it would probably be auctioned for a sky-high price. Meng Qi didn't care. Just the current price had far exceeded her expectations. In the end, 12 second-grade Dark North pills were sold for 277th grade lingstones. The lingstones from the auction will also be sent to you after you send these Dark North pills to the relay station, Xue Jinwen told Meng Qi. Do you want to continue looking? Go back first. I'll go first. Meng Qi nodded at her. 277th grade lingstones was already a huge sum of money for Meng Qi. But she knew that in a place like Sky Beyond Heaven, it was really nothing. When the auction started, those people didn't know what was so special about the Dark North pill, and they could casually throw out dozens of 6th grade lingstones to buy it back to try. Meng Qi was quite self-aware. I still want to continue looking here, Xue Jinwen said. After you go out and return to my residence, there will be a teleportation array to send you away. Okay. Meng Qi nodded. She bowed to Xue Jinwen and turned to walk out of the door. Xue Jinwen watched Meng Qi's departing figure. She was neither arrogant nor rash. She was calm and collected. Very good. She looked at Meng Qi even more highly. She really didn't know which hidden sect could cultivate such a disciple. It made her a little yearn for it. The only strange thing was, would a disciple cultivated by such a sect lack spirit stones? Xue Jinwen was a little puzzled. The more important a disciple was to be cultivated by a large sect, the less they had to worry about material things like spirit stones. They only needed to focus on cultivation and put all their energy into it. As far as she knew, some disciples of large sects in the 4 great realms would not even come to Sky Beyond Heaven before they reached the nascent soul 5th stage. The disciples who would open shops here for their sects were often those who were not so talented in cultivation. Or they were willing to. Xue Jinwen reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear. Her eyes were shining. Like her. Meng Qi left the entrance courtyard of the Xian auction house and couldn't help but look back at the quaint courtyard. Such a one-person, one-world setting was not only unique but also very special. She could guess that this should be the effect of a large talisman array set up by countless small talisman arrays. But the specific method of doing it was completely beyond Meng Qi's ability. Her feelings these days were, the master of Sky Beyond Heaven put so much thought into every blade of grass, every tree, every house, and every tile. To maintain such a huge city, there were still 7 floating islands. It was really super powerful and super rich. Meng Qi walked very fast with Xue Jinwen on the way here. She simply slowed down and walked back the way she came. The scenery of the floating island was quite good. The blue sky seemed to be within reach, and the white clouds were on the side. Occasionally, melodious sounds of stringed and woodwind instruments came from higher places. When Meng Qi looked up, she could see the floating island higher up. She didn't walk far before someone passed by her again, their clothes fluttering in the wind. The white-robed man was tall, and his long sleeves fluttered in the wind. His ink-black hair was tied up by a small crown on his head. Just from his back, he did look like an immortal. Meng Qi glanced at the other party's back. Su Junmo again. He was leaving so early too. As soon as she saw this guy, she couldn't help but think of the noisy big white fox. That month was really the most terrifying month Meng Qi had experienced in her medical cultivation career. As long as the white fox had a little bit of strength, it would be able to chatter non-stop. When Meng Qi despised him, he could still slap her with his tail. White fur flew all over the sky, and he spat out a mouthful of fur when he opened his mouth. As long as Meng Qi was treating him, he would babble on and on. She really couldn't stand it anymore and hid further away. After all, he was a so-called heavenly demon noble, the five-tailed great white fox. He could lie there aggrievedly, holding his claws, drooping his head, and mumbling for a long time. Meng Qi had no resistance to fluffy fur and pointed ears. Moreover, she couldn't hide too far away for too long. After all, Su Junmo's injuries hadn't healed yet. In short, during the entire month of treating Su Junmo's injuries, Meng Qi only felt that each day was like a year. She never knew that a fox could be so talkative. Later, Su Junmo recovered and could transform again. Meng Qi immediately packed up her bag and hid far away. Later, whenever she saw the cold Su Junmo, she couldn't help but think of the talkative great white fox. Su Junmo, who looked like a human, was very popular with female cultivators, but Meng Qi hid whenever she saw him. There was no fluffy fur or cute pointed ears. In her eyes, Su Junmo was only a chatterbox. If she had to listen to the fluffy white fox's muttering, she could still barely endure it. Meng Qi only felt extremely happy when she thought about such a tall and slender man mumbling to her. So later, when those people questioned her why she hid whenever she saw Su Junmo if she didn't do anything wrong and didn't have a guilty conscience, through the crowd, Meng Qi looked at the tall and aloof white-robed man who was standing high up. He hesitated. She also felt very surprised. Even if Su Junmo wasn't grateful to her, he should at least remember that she was the one who cured him. Was it really okay to treat the person who saved him so coldly? Meng Qi couldn't tell others that Su Junmo was a talkative great white fox. Because he was a demon cultivator, and most human cultivators didn't like him. Moreover, Su Junmo definitely wouldn't admit it. After all, if his identity was exposed, even if he wasn't killed, he would be sent out of the Trichilia Chasm and returned to his demon realm. Then he wouldn't be able to continue being with senior sister Lu Qingran, whom he liked. At that time, Meng Qi met Su Junmo's cold gaze and looked at the indifference on his face. She even felt that maybe Su Junmo wanted to kill her to silence her, so that she could keep his secret forever. Meng Qi retracted her gaze, and her expression became colder than before. Of course, she had already guessed that it was most likely because she saved Su Junmo and provoked senior sister Lu Qingran. That was why people suspected her and she was in big trouble again. The white-robed man in front of her also seemed to have noticed Meng Qi. He didn't look back, but his footsteps paused slightly. A pleasant and low voice, like the eternal morning light, came from the front. "Fellow Daoist, I'm afraid you're going in the wrong direction. The teleportation array you left is on the left side of the fork just now." It wasn't Su Junmo. This was Meng Qi's first reaction. She was all too familiar with Su Junmo's voice. If it was anyone else, they would also be engraved in their bones and unforgettable for the rest of their life after hearing the demonic sound for an entire month. And this voice, Master. Meng Qi suddenly sped up and chased after the white-robed man in front of her. After leaving that sentence, the other party took another step and was already very far away. So far that Meng Qi couldn't even see his figure clearly. Was it Master? Meng Qi was a little uncertain. It didn't have Master's laziness and casualness, and it seemed much clearer. But the timbre was really similar, very similar. And Meng Qi suddenly remembered that in a glance just now, the other party's hair was also a small black sandalwood crown, not the white jade crown that Su Junmo always used. Whatever. She quickened her pace and hurried in the direction that the person left. The reason why Meng Qi wanted to wait for Cool Breeze Valley to merge into Burning Sky Palace was to leave Cool Breeze Town with them. She wanted to go to the Western world, and Cool Breeze Valley was the farthest eastern edge of the Eastern world from the Western world. If she took another step back, she would enter the territory of the demon realm. Meng Qi only met her master 2 years later in her previous life. That man with a gorgeous face, who was always lazy and carefree, said that he came from a hidden sect in the Western world. It was his first time traveling to the Eastern world, and he happened to meet Meng Qi. In this life, Meng Qi wanted to find him in advance. She didn't want to wait 2 years. That was why she was so persistent in going to the Western world. Besides, it wasn't that she didn't think that she might meet him in the sky beyond heaven. Thinking of this, Meng Qi walked even faster. Whether the other party was her master or not, she had to see it with her own eyes. The white-robed man's figure quickly disappeared completely. Meng Qi wasn't discouraged. She chased in the direction that the other party left. She hadn't gone far when she felt a weight on her shoulder. A slender hand silently rested on her shoulder. "Fellow Daoist, please stay." A cold man's voice sounded in her ear. "The place ahead is not a place you can go YQXSW. The voice of the man who spoke was very pleasant. But in Meng Qi's ears, it was like a demon's voice. Almost subconsciously, she jumped a big step to the side. The other man in a white robe stood in the same place. His expression was cold, and his black hair was tied on top of his head by a small white jade crown. His phoenix eyes were long and narrow, and the bridge of his nose was high. From the front, Su Junmo did have the right to be arrogant. Meng Qi was sizing him up. He was also sizing up Meng Qi with a scrutinizing gaze. He didn't know who this girl was before, but he stood there looking at her thoughtfully. His lord, who hadn't shown up for a long time, suddenly appeared and urgently summoned him to the sky beyond heaven just to raise the price for this girl. And just now, they had clearly left the auction house together. He still had a lot to say to his lord. Just as he was about to speak, his lord suddenly quickened his pace, just to remind this girl that she was going the wrong way. Su Junmo's eyes flickered. He seemed to be casually glancing at Meng Qi, but in his heart, he was crazily complaining her looks were okay, but she seemed a little small. Her figure was far inferior to his clan sisters. The pills she refined were only second grade, and they were only sold for a few hundred seventh-grade spirit stones. She didn't seem to be very capable. Why was his lord helping her? Was there anything special about this girl? Su Junmo's expression didn't change, and countless thoughts flashed through his mind. He could feel the vigilance coming from the girl. She was actually still guarding against him? Guarding against what? What did she think he would do to her? Thank you for the reminder. Meng Qi's eyes were still looking forward with some reluctance. But she also knew that with Su Junmo there was no way she could continue to follow. Her gaze fell on Su Junmo's white robe, and her heart suddenly skipped a beat. Medical cultivators were often more attentive than other cultivators. With a glance, Meng Qi suddenly remembered that the style of the white-robed man's outer robe seemed to be similar to Su Junmo's. But it wasn't certain. The outer robes of cultivators were similar, and she only took a quick glance just now. "Fellow Daoist." Su Junmo turned and pointed in another direction. "The teleportation array is in this direction." "What about here?" Meng Qi asked casually. "Can't we return to the heavens beyond Heaven City?" she asked. "No," Su Junmo said lightly. "Oh." Meng Qi nodded. "Thank you, fellow Daoist. If they couldn't return to the heavens beyond Heaven City, then it should be to another floating island. It shouldn't be the teleportation array to leave the heavens beyond heaven, or else Su Junmo wouldn't have specially stopped her. Thank you for the reminder, fellow Daoist." Meng Qi took another step back. She turned and walked back the way she came. Although she didn't look back, Meng Qi knew that Su Junmo had been watching her leave. She narrowed her eyes and returned to her room through the teleportation array. The jade scroll was already slightly warm from her grip. Meng Qi opened her palm and looked at the mysterious little thing in her palm. Who was that person? She shook her head, pulled herself together, and threw the jade scroll back into the storage bag in her bracelet. When she turned her head, little Qi was still lying obediently beside her. His little head drooped on his paws, and he looked a little listless. "Little Qi." Meng Qi reached out and lifted his chin so that his face was facing her. "Why do you look like?" Meng Qi looked at the other party's eyes, which had obviously become a little dim. Although little Qi had indeed slept a lot these few days, why did it feel like he had overdrawn his strength and looked very tired at this moment? Could it be that his injuries had changed? Meng Qi quickly checked the other party's injuries again. Good. She heaved a sigh of relief. It didn't get heavier, and it didn't change. Meng Qi thought for a moment and took out a dark north pill from her storage bag. She stuffed it into little Qi's mouth and was about to say something. Suddenly, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard from outside her room. "Fellow Daoist Meng." Someone knocked on the door, and the voice sounded very anxious. "Is fellow Daoist Meng here? My young palace master is injured, please come and take a look." The voice outside paused, and then said anxiously, "He said that only you can cure him." After being imprisoned by the Demon King for 3 months, Zhao Yuchen finally proved that he was really cuddling the demon in the spirit of academia with the newly written 100 Ways of Kissing Ancient Demons. Serious and gentle student attacked by ex-cold-blooded and heartless Demon King 1v1 sweet pampering text. Chapter 23. Who's Injured? Meng Qi opened the door and saw 4 Burning Sky Palace disciples standing outside. This time, Elder Zun Yang led a team to support Cool Breeze Valley. In addition to his own nascent soul stage, he also brought some Jindan and Zhuji disciples. 2 days ago, they all went out to exterminate demons, and even Chu Tianfeng went with them. As soon as Meng Qi opened the door, she saw 2 Burning Sky Palace disciples carrying a soft palanquin. Chu Tianfeng's body was weak, and he sat on it with a pale face. The disciple who came to knock said anxiously, "Elder Zun, the sect leader, and the elders haven't returned yet. Young Palace Master didn't allow us to inform them for fear of affecting them. He told us to find fellow Daoist Meng and said that you can heal him." Chu Tianfeng was injured again? Meng Qi looked past the disciple and at the youth behind him. The other's complexion did not look good, his face was pale. His thin lips were bloodless. A dark red, already solidified bloodstain could be seen at the corner of his lips. Meng Qi, he did look a bit miserable. She stepped forward, her right hand forming a spell, and started to carefully examine Chu Tianfeng's injuries. In her last life, she had stayed in the dungeon and didn't know the entire process of the battle. They had nascent soul cultivators on their side, and the other side didn't seem weak. Then, Meng Qi was silent. She took a deep breath. "The demon that injured you seemed to have a lower cultivation than you." Chu Tianfeng looked a bit scary, but his injuries weren't serious. His spirit energy was abundant. Compared to last time when he was poisoned, his cultivation was even suppressed. This time, it was just a small injury. After taking some medicine, he would be able to jump around in a few days. "You." Meng Qi's brows furrowed slightly. Before she could speak, Chu Tianfeng interrupted her. "I'll pay. Meng Qi, as long as you can heal me as soon as possible and let me go back to help the elders." Chu Tianfeng's eyes were like cold stars as he stared unblinkingly at Meng Qi. "Any amount is fine." Meng Qi, several disciples of the Burning Sky Palace also looked at her anxiously. No matter what, they were here to help Cool Breeze Valley. The Cool Breeze Valley was saved. Only Meng Qi, who was at the qi refining stage, could save himself. She took a deep breath. "Such a small injury," Meng Qi said. "Send someone to the Immortal Cloud Pavilion to buy 2/3 tier rain pills for you." "Okay." Chu Tianfeng nodded. His eyes sparkled. "Where's your consultation fee? How much should I give you?" Meng Qi hesitated. She had just received a huge sum of 277 spirit stones. To be honest, she wasn't that short of money right now. However, it was obviously impossible not to charge him. 1/4 stage spirit stone. Meng Qi said. "Okay." Chu Tianfeng raised his chin towards the disciple who carried him, indicating that he should take out the spirit stones. In an instant, he felt much better, and his pale face slowly regained some color. He didn't need others to continue carrying him, and stood up from the soft sedan chair by himself. "The enemy this time is more cunning than we thought." Chu Tianfeng said to Meng Qi, "It's best that you don't leave Cool Breeze Valley during this time. The elders have set up a protective array around it to ensure the safety of the disciples of Cool Breeze Valley." "Okay." Meng Qi nodded. "Thank you for your hard work." Her expression was indifferent. Chu Tianfeng didn't seem to feel that there was anything wrong and continued to try to find a topic. "Your sect master has already agreed to follow us to the Burning Sky Palace after this matter is over." A hint of joy flashed through his eyes, and his tone became light. "We'll be fellow sect members in the future. Young Palace Master Chu, if there's nothing else, I'm going to Cool Breeze Town. I'll take my leave first." Meng Qi bowed to him. She still had to go to Cool Breeze Town to hand over the Dark North pill to the relay station in the sky beyond heaven and collect her spirit stones. Just now, the jade slip reminded her that the jackdaw grass she bought had also arrived. Meng Qi was worried about Little White Tiger's injury. She already knew that Cool Breeze Valley would become a subsidiary sect of the Burning Sky Palace. It wasn't surprising. If it was before this auction, Meng Qi would have thought about whether to join the Burning Sky Palace's medical hall. She was indeed very interested in their library. But after this incident, she had already made up her mind. The less she was involved with Chu Tianfeng, the better. With the sky beyond heaven, she could always find a way to exchange for the books she needed. I'm going too. Chu Tianfeng hurriedly followed Meng Qi and explained, we're going to the Cloud Immortal Pavilion to buy medicine. It's on the way. Meng Qi, those disciples of the Fantian Palace watched as the young palace master walked out of the sect with Meng Qi as if nothing had happened. The few of them looked at each other in dismay. Are we waiting for the young palace master here? One of them asked. What else can we do? Another person shook his head helplessly. Speaking of which, one of the disciples in charge of carrying Chu Tianfeng back suddenly asked, do you still remember how the young palace master was injured at that time? I was a little far away, so I didn't see it clearly. I saw it. Another person carrying the sedan said, the young palace master's opponent was a third-stage second realm demonic cultivator whose cultivation was lower than his. At first, the young palace master had the upper hand, so no one thought of going up to help. Later, he recalled seriously, I seem to have seen the young palace master subdue the demonic cultivator. The other party had clearly given up struggling, so I didn't continue to pay attention. So I don't know how the young palace master was injured FQXSW. Or it should be that the demonic cultivator pretended to admit defeat, and then suddenly attacked the young palace master when he was unprepared. Demonic cultivators are indeed extremely cunning. We have to be careful when we meet them in the future. They looked at each other again and saw traces of doubt in each other's eyes. But they were originally sent by Elder Zun to protect Chu Tianfeng. The young palace master was fine, which was a happy thing for everyone. No one would delve into it. Fortunately, fellow Daoist Meng was there. I heard that the young palace master was even more seriously injured last time, and was also saved by her. They quickly changed the topic. Do you think the young palace master is interested in this fellow Daoist Meng? I previously thought that the young palace master was interested in Lu Qingran of Cool Breeze Valley. But have you seen the young palace master pay attention to her these past few days? As soon as the person who spoke finished speaking, the person standing next to him quickly tugged at his sleeve. Lu Qingran, who they had just mentioned, was walking over here quickly. She saw the several disciples standing outside Meng Qi's store and stopped with a face full of worry. I heard that Tianfeng was injured. Is he okay? The disciples looked at each other. No one spoke, but their expressions were a little strange. Lu Qingran glanced at them, and her heart tightened. She quickly walked forward and reached out to push Meng Qi's door. What's wrong? Is it serious? Then junior sister Meng, Lu Qingran had just pushed open the door when she suddenly screamed and retreated. No one saw clearly what had happened just now. Even she herself only saw a blur in front of her eyes. Then, she felt a cloud of white mist rushing towards her. Then, my face. Lu Qingran covered her face with both hands. My eyes are also itchy. It hurts. She screamed and retreated again and again. I can't see anything. My face is so itchy. Master. The several disciples of Fantian Palace didn't know what had happened. They saw Lu Qingran screaming so miserably, so they didn't dare to go forward and touch her. Lu Qingran's scream quickly attracted some disciples of Cool Breeze Valley. The sect master and the elders were all out fighting the enemy. Most of the disciples who stayed in the sect were only at the qi refining stage. They didn't dare to touch Lu Qingran. Senior sister Lu should be poisoned. A Cool Breeze Valley disciple looked from afar and quickly said, look at her face and neck. There are so many red spots. There seems to be pus. She should be poisoned. What's going on? What happened just now? How could junior sister Lu be poisoned in the sect? Heavens, those red spots are still growing. It looks so disgusting. I'm a little scared. Lu Qingran only felt that her face was getting more and more itchy, and also more and more painful. She heard all the words of those disciples, and her heart became more and more frightened. She didn't dare to scratch her face and neck, but the itchy feeling seemed to penetrate into her bones and blood bit by bit. It made her want to scratch her face fiercely. Lu Qingran forced herself to calm down. She quickly took out 2 pills from her storage bag and stuffed them into her mouth. But the itchy and painful feeling didn't leave her. Her face was even hot, as if something was drilling out of her skin. "Ah, Senior Sister Lu, your face. There's so much pus, and it's green. What's wrong with Senior Sister Lu?" "Meng Qi." Lu Qingran couldn't care anymore and screamed, "Where's Junior Sister Meng Qi?" She covered her face and turned to those Cool Breeze Valley disciples. "Quickly go find Junior Sister Meng Qi." Oh. A disciple quickly turned around and ran out. Lu Qingran didn't dare to move. She felt more and more uncomfortable, and that itchy and painful feeling seemed to be going down her neck. Gradually, even her whole body began to itch. In Meng Qi's room, little Qi was jumping onto the bed. He lazily lay down again, but that pair of azure blue eyes were dimmer than when Meng Qi left. The protective array set up by Meng Qi at the door had 2 lines slightly changed. It didn't seem to change much, but the effect would be doubled. Little Qi closed his eyes and lay down lazily. He needed to have a good rest. Today was really too tiring. The commotion outside the door continued for a long time, but it didn't seem to affect little Qi at all. After some time, he finally heard the sound of footsteps that he was gradually getting familiar with. Little White Tiger, who was lying down lazily just now, instantly raised its head, and its 2 fluffy little ears stood up and even swayed slightly. He quickly realized that it was wrong of him to do that. How could he be happy for a girl who would forcefully hug him to sleep and did that kind of thing the first time they met? Little White Tiger hurriedly lay down again and rested its head on its front paws. But this time, its eyes didn't continue to close. What's going on? Meng Qi returned from Cool Breeze Town and saw that there was a mess outside his door. The person at the door with her back facing everyone and trembling all over was Senior Sister Lu Qingran? Junior Sister Meng Qi. Someone immediately said, Senior Sister Lu seems to have been poisoned. Meng Qi? Now, they were all looking for her when they were poisoned. Junior Sister Meng. After the previous incident, the Cool Breeze Valley disciples were much more polite to Meng Qi. Especially since the young palace lord of Burning Sky Palace was standing tall and guarding behind her. Senior Sister Lu seems to have been poisoned at your place. That disciple cautiously reminded Meng Qi. Meng Qi looked up and saw that Lu Qingran's body was trembling even more violently. Junior Sister Meng Qi, I've been poisoned by you. Lu Qingran didn't need to look in the mirror to know that she must look extremely horrifying. She didn't understand why the poison seemed to have gotten worse even though she had clearly taken the antidote. Lu Qingran didn't dare to turn around. Now, not only could she see faint yellow pus seeping out of her face, neck, and even her sleeves. It looked extremely disgusting. Can you please detoxify me first? Lu Qingran's voice trembled slightly and sounded a little pitiful. I was just too worried about Tianfeng just now and forgot to knock on the door in a moment of panic. I didn't mean to break into your room and didn't want to peek at your secrets. Don't be angry with me, can you give me the antidote first? Meng Qi suddenly realized that Lu Qingran had wanted to enter her room, so she was injured by the protective array she had left behind. She took a step forward and was about to give the antidote to Lu Qingran. However, her wrist suddenly felt warm as Chu Tianfeng grabbed it. The youth glanced at her and took a step forward. He looked coldly at Lu Qingran and said indifferently, Lu Qingran, is this how you apologize? What do you mean you've been poisoned by Meng Qi? You didn't respect your own junior sister and barged into someone else's room without permission. You deserved to be poisoned by someone in the room. Chu Tianfeng's voice was colder than the cold pond at the top of Qingfeng Valley. If you want to apologize for doing something wrong, then apologize properly, he said coldly, don't use me as an excuse. Chapter 24. The surroundings suddenly quieted down. Meng Qi looked at Chu Tianfeng in surprise. This young man, who doted on and protected Lu Qingran in his previous life, was looking at his senior sister coldly with a gloomy face. The disciples of Cool Breeze Valley and Burning Sky Palace didn't speak. They all stared blankly at this scene. Not long ago, they saw this young palace master carrying senior sister Lu back affectionately. Did he have a complete change of heart so quickly? Meng Qi's wrist gently twisted, and Chu Tianfeng let go of her wrist. His hand hung by his side, and his palm seemed to still have the feeling of the other party's green robe. It was a very ordinary cotton robe, but to him, it gave him an indescribable feeling of warmth. What was going on? Meng Qi frowned. Chu Tianfeng actually scolded Lu Qingran in public. Why did it feel a bit strange? I'm sorry. Lu Qingran was silent for a while, then suddenly opened her mouth weakly. She had been poisoned and worried for a long time. Now that she was mercilessly scolded by the young man she liked, her face became hotter and hotter. She didn't know if it was because of embarrassment or the effect of the poison. Tianfeng, I was really worried about you. I'm sorry, you don't have to apologize to me. Chu Tianfeng frowned and coldly interrupted Lu Qingran. He looked at her coldly. The one you should apologize to is your junior sister. I'm sorry, junior sister Meng Qi. Lu Qingran gently bit her lower lip. She also didn't understand what was wrong with Chu Tianfeng. She didn't want to do anything to junior sister Meng Qi. She was really worried about Chu Tianfeng. When she heard that he was injured and carried back, she hurried back to see him. She was really too worried, so she ran to junior sister's room without thinking. Oh. Meng Qi narrowed her eyes and said indifferently, be careful next time. I really didn't do it on purpose. Lu Qingran still wanted to explain. She didn't dare to mention Chu Tianfeng again. I was really too worried just now. Got it, Meng Qi replied casually. She didn't hate Lu Qingran. She was the daughter of the Heavenly Tao. Before she could go against the Heavenly Tao and go against the Heavenly Tao, there was no need to make things too stiff with her. Otherwise, the Heavenly Tao might find her an eyesore and kill her directly. Chu Tianfeng frowned and wanted to say something. He opened his mouth but didn't say anything in the end. Her impatience with Lu Qingran had reached its peak. Meng Qi had already taken out a pill from his storage bracelet and tossed it to Lu Qingran, detoxification medicine. She had placed some medicinal powder in the protective array of the room that would cause abscesses. It was not that serious. At most, the abscesses would be red and itchy. Taking the medicine would relieve the symptoms very quickly. She looked at Lu Qingran's face as she reached out to take the pill. Meng Qi couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. After learning this defensive array, she rarely used it. In the past, she had directly put fatal poison in it. This time, she didn't put it. She knew that when someone touched the array and activated its power, it would automatically release the medicinal powder. It could also strengthen the effect of the medicinal powder. Was this point so scary? Meng Qi looked at Lu Qingran's face, which had become a little disgusting and terrifying. She couldn't help but swallow her saliva. No wonder senior apprentice sister Lu Qingran sounded like she was about to cry. She didn't even dare to face Chu Tianfeng when she took the medicine. It was really a little scary. Thank you, junior apprentice sister Meng Qi. Lu Qingran quickly turned her back and took the pill. A chill instantly surrounded her, and the itchy pain on her face eased a lot. She was surprised. They were all detoxification pills. If she took the one she made herself, it would aggravate the toxicity. Meng Qi's effect was immediate. When did this little junior apprentice sister, who had only been in the sect for half a year, become so powerful in medicine? No wonder the sect master said that Elder Yang admired junior apprentice sister Meng Qi very much. He said that she was extremely talented and was second only to him in the sect. Lu Qingran wanted to turn her head to look at Meng Qi, but then she remembered her current appearance. And Chu Tianfeng, she also didn't understand. Before she fainted because of that terrifying monster, Chu Tianfeng was still very concerned and took care of her. She heard from her senior apprentice sisters that he even carried her back to the sect. Why did he treat her so harshly the moment she woke up? If there's nothing else. Meng Qi looked around at the onlookers. I'll go back to my room first. She had already received the jackdaw grass and the scroll Xue Jinwen gave her. She wanted to study it carefully. She didn't want to stand here and waste time. I'll take my leave. Lu Qingran was the first to leave. Seeing that there was no more drama to watch, the onlookers also left one after another. Chu Tianfeng took a deep look at Meng Qi and said to the 4 disciples, "You guys go first." He took a step forward. "I have something to say to you." Meng Qi's footsteps paused slightly. Chu Tianfeng quickly said, "Your sect master has agreed that when Elder Zun returns, the entire Cool Breeze Valley will go to Burning Sky Palace with us." He paused. "From now on, Cool Breeze Valley will be a subordinate sect of Burning Sky Palace. I've discussed it with Elder Zun. You can enter the medical hall of our Burning Sky Palace. The main purpose there is to study medicine and there are no worldly affairs. It's very suitable for you." "I want to go to Burning City," Meng Qi said, "but I won't enter Burning Sky Palace." She turned her head to look at Chu Tianfeng. "If Burning Sky Palace is willing to let me go with the team, I can pay spirit stones as a reward." "Why?" Chu Tianfeng frowned slightly. "Just like how I charge for treatment, the fee for protecting me is also very reasonable." Meng Qi said matter-of-factly, "I don't like to talk about favors. It's better for us to settle the accounts clearly. Ran when you know that's not what I'm asking." Chu Tianfeng looked at Meng Qi. "I don't know." Meng Qi was a little speechless. How come she never knew that Chu Tianfeng was such a person? Where was that proud and cold young man? She felt that she still appreciated the previous Chu Tianfeng more. "Young Palace Master Chu, as I said before, it's better for us not to even greet each other when we meet." Meng Qi said, "You may be a little grateful that I saved you, but I charged for treatment and received a lot of spirit stones. We're even now. Besides." She paused. "My senior martial sister is in love with you. You scolded her like that just now, so she must be sad and upset. I don't know where she's crying now. I don't know what conflict you two have, but I don't want to be involved in your dispute at all." Meng Qi crossed her hands and made a gesture of refusal. "I don't want to at all. Please go back." After she finished speaking, she didn't give Chu Tianfeng a chance to speak and quickly walked back to her room. It wasn't in her nature to speak ill of others. Chu Tianfeng was helping her just now after all. Meng Qi really couldn't bring herself to scold or mock him. She returned to her room and carefully checked it. The array on the ground had indeed been activated. There was still a faint smell of medicinal powder left in the air. TSK, Meng Qi recalled Lu Qingran's miserable face. Was the effect of this formation on poisons so powerful? Was that? She squatted down and casually drew along the lines of the array with her fingers. If it could enhance the effect of poison, then the medicine used for treatment should have the same effect. In that case, could it be twice the result with half the effort? Hey! Meng Qi's eyes flashed and fell on the 2 diagonal lines in the center of the array. She remembered that it wasn't drawn like this here. She had an excellent memory and was meticulous. She was even more observant of this kind of detail. Although the array didn't change much, Meng Qi still saw it. "What's going on?" Meng Qi stood up, looked down at the protective array, and murmured. Did someone touch it? Or did she really draw it wrong when she left in a hurry? She swept her gaze across the entire room and confirmed that no one had touched the array in other places. Little Qi was still lying lazily on the bed, looking even weaker than when she left. His blue eyes were even dimmer. His little head rested on his paws, and his small semicircular ears seemed to have become weak. He even looked a little aggrieved. Little Qi. Meng Qi went forward and patted him. I brought back the jackdaw grass. She took out the wooden box containing the jackdaw grass from her storage bag. Apart from that, there was also a scroll sent by Xue Jinwen. Northland Herbal Medicine Compendium. Meng Qi held the bamboo scroll in her hand, and a faint light emitted from her palm. She read very quickly and quickly found the description of the jackdaw grass. The feather-shaped black grass grows on the peak of the snowy mountains in the Northland. After being poisoned, silver blood spots can be seen on the wound, and it hasn't healed for years. There was also a method to cure the poison of the jackdaw grass. Everything else is fine, But the heavenly stargrass and the blazing feather, Meng Qi frowned. She might be able to buy the heavenly stargrass in the heavens beyond heaven, but what about the blazing feather? It was said that this was the feather of a phoenix from the heavenly demon clan in the demon realm. It was one of the legendary treasures of heaven and earth. Meng Qi had never seen it before. She might not be able to find it even if she searched all 3,000 worlds. A dark light flashed across the eyes of the little white tiger, who had been lying lazily. Blazing feather, was it really them? The blazing feather. Meng Qi paced back and forth in the room. If she wanted to cure the poison of the jackdaw grass, she had to use the blazing feather. Then, she frowned. Did she have to find that noisy fox, Su Junmo? He was a heavenly demon aristocrat, so he might have it. Meng Qi narrowed her eyes. She remembered that Su Junmo wouldn't appear by Lu Qingran's side for the time being. Then where should she go to find him? The heavens beyond heaven? Meng Qi was a little hesitant. Let's not talk about this first. She took out 2 pills and stuffed them into little Qi's mouth. One was a dark north pill, and the other was a seasonal rain pill. Before going to Fan City, let's find this medicine first. To cure the poison of the jackdaw grass, in addition to the heavenly stargrass and the blazing feather, she also needed some cold spring spirit dew. This could be found at the bottom of the cold lake in Cool Breeze Valley. Meng Qi packed her things, got up, and walked towards the peak of Cool Breeze Valley. The sect master and elders weren't around, so no one would go to the cold lake. As Meng Qi walked towards the cold lake, she stuffed a spring warmth pill into her mouth. After all, she was only at the Qi refinement stage, so the cold lake water was still a little too cold for her. Before she reached it, Meng Qi heard a sorrowful cry. That voice sounded very sad. But even when she cried, it was soft and exceptionally pleasant to the ears. Lu Qingran. Meng Qi immediately saw Lu Qingran, who was lying on a big rock beside the cold lake, crying sadly. When she heard footsteps, she also turned around to look at Meng Qi. Her face was full of tears, and her eyes were red. She looked very pitiful. Junior sister Meng Qi. Lu Qingran quickly stood up and quickly wiped away the tears on her face. Senior sister Lu. Meng Qi looked at her. Lu Qingran was already at the foundation establishment stage, so the cold lake was still too strong for her. The sect master must have given her warm jade magic weapon to his beloved disciple, so she was not affected by the cold at all by the cold lake. You. Lu Qingran stood up and looked at Meng Qi somewhat helplessly. She was born beautiful, and even more so after crying. A beauty with tears, like a pear blossom in the rain. Junior sister Meng, did you come here for something? Lu Qingran asked tentatively. To find something, Meng Qi said. She took off her robe and changed into a tight-fitting water suit inside. You want to go into the water? Lu Qingran widened her eyes in surprise. Yes. Meng Qi stuffed 2 more spring warmth pills into her mouth. Then. Lu Qingran seemed to be at a loss. Then do you want to? As she spoke, she took out the warm jade that her master gave her. Take this with you. No need. Meng Qi shook her head. As she spoke, she quickly walked to the edge of the lake and jumped down easily. Even though she was wearing a water suit, the bone-piercing cold lake water still attacked her limbs and bones. Meng Qi gritted her teeth and dove down. The cold spring spiritual dew was at the bottom of the cold lake, and there was only a very, very small spot. It would take hundreds of years to accumulate half a bottle. When Meng Qi returned to Cool Breeze Valley after she formed her gold core, this place had already been looted by the Yaomor, and nothing was left. Only the cold lake water was still there. Meng Qi dived into the water and searched for 3 days before she finally determined the location of the spring and found a small bottle of cold spring spiritual dew. She swam in the direction of her memory. Lianqi Xiuzhe could already breathe without relying on air, but the lake water was bone-piercing, and she didn't want to stay here for too long. Chem. Seeing that she was about to reach the spring, Meng Qi vaguely saw a black shadow in front of her. The water of the cold lake wasn't very clear. When she was at the bottom, she usually couldn't see what was in front of her. She hesitated. The direction of the black shadow was exactly where the spring was. Moreover, the shadow looked very long and floated in the same place. It didn't look very dangerous. Meng Qi took out her little medicine knife from her storage bag and continued to swim forward. Chem. This is. When she swam closer, Meng Qi's eyes widened in shock. The black shadow turned out to be a person. He was wearing black clothes and was floating above the spring with his face down. A black belt was tied around his waist. The other end of the belt was tied to the spring. She didn't know if he had done this himself or if someone had purposely tied him here. Meng Qi swam around him. The other didn't move at all. She didn't know if he had fainted or already. Her mind moved, and she swam over and stopped next to the other. She reached out and grabbed the other's shoulder, and carefully turned him around. Meng Qi. Floating in the cold lake water was a young man. His face was pale, and his eyes were tightly closed. His young face looked a little distorted in the water. But even so, it couldn't hide his handsome face at all. Meng Qi's thoughts paused for a moment. But the hand holding the other's shoulder seemed to have its own consciousness, and it quickly checked the man's physical condition. He was still alive. She subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief. She held a spell with one hand and tapped the man's forehead between his eyebrows, and the other hand was about to reach for the medicine in her storage bag. Meng Qi's hand had just touched the other's forehead when it suddenly froze again. This was another F*King one, a subject under Lu Qingran's skirt. And it was a super powerful one. This person was even more powerful than Chu Tianfeng and that talkative big fox. Should she save him? Meng Qi pursed her lips. Although the man was still alive, his breathing was weak, and she could feel his pulse beating and stopping. The spiritual energy in his body was chaotic and rampaging, completely out of his control. Of course, she knew why. This guy was already at the peak of the golden core stage. The cultivators in the Trichiliocosm had to go through a tribulation from the golden core stage to the next stage. The tribulation lightning between each stage of the golden core stage would be very weak. But when one reached the peak of the golden core stage and wanted to enter the nascent soul stage, the tribulation lightning would be very terrifying. This guy was stabbed in the back by his former friend when he was going through the tribulation, and his spiritual energy backfired. Although he escaped with his life, now he was even worse than an ordinary chi cultivator. He must have tied himself here himself. The cold pool of spiritual water could indeed calm the spiritual energy that had become chaotic because of his spiritual energy backfire. But if he just wanted to rely on the cold pool of spiritual water, he would have to go crazy, and that might not work even after hundreds of years. Meng Qi frowned. She remembered that this person didn't appear so early. This guy only appeared after they arrived at Burnt City. Then now, her eyes flashed. To save or not to save? Forget it. Meng Qi thought of what had happened in the past and let go of the other party. Anyway, he wouldn't die, so let him stay here by himself. She let go of the man and took out a small porcelain bottle from her storage bag, ready to store the cold pool of spiritual water. This thing was very rare, and there was often only a small bottle in hundreds of years. Meng Qi wasn't sure how deeply little Qi was poisoned and how much cold pool of spiritual water he needed. She simply swept away the cold pool of spiritual water that had accumulated in the spring for more than 100 years. If she couldn't use it up, she could sell it. This thing was quite rare. Although it wasn't a treasure, it wasn't cheap either. It was sold in drops. Meng Qi had just put away the porcelain bottle with satisfaction when the man in black beside her suddenly struggled wildly. Ah! He let out a roar in his throat, not knowing if it was from pain or, damn it. Meng Qi was suddenly stunned. She forgot. This guy chose this place to recuperate. First, the cold pool could isolate his aura, so it wouldn't be easy to find him. Another reason was that there was cold pool of spiritual water here. This thing was especially useful for people who went crazy, and it had a great effect in calming spiritual energy. If she took it away, the man in black would be finished. Should she save him? Countless thoughts flashed through Meng Qi's mind. Don't worry about him. A voice was telling her that this person was also Lu Qingran's admirer, and he was ruthless and too much. If he died, then he died. Anyway, Meng Qi's hands hanging by her side clenched into fists. The man in black struggled even harder. His limbs seemed to be twitching, and his originally handsome face became a little ferocious. He stirred the cold pool water as he struggled. The water washed Meng Qi's body. His face was even uglier than before. Meng Qi muttered, "If he died, then so be it. He wasn't a good person anyway. The most important thing was that she was alive, damn it." Meng Qi suddenly reached out, grabbed the man's arm, and rushed towards the cold pool water with him. Chapter 25. Meng Qi waved her medicine knife and cut off the belt around the man's waist. She swam very fast. The water in the cold pool was bone-chilling, but she didn't forget to stuff 2 more pills into her mouth. The black-clothed man's limbs were still twitching. She held his shoulders and felt that they were heavy and stiff. The chaotic spiritual aura in the other party's body seemed to pass through her palm and into her body. Even through a layer of robe, she could feel how ferocious and crazy the backlash of spiritual aura caused by qi deviation was. She took away the cold spring spiritual dew, and this guy was obviously relying on it to heal himself. If she really left him alone, he would die in a few days. Meng Qi's mood was complicated. With a splash, she finally broke out of the water with the black-clothed man. Meng Qi made a small seal with her left hand and carried him to the shore. Junior Marshal Sister Meng Qi? Lu Qingran hadn't left yet. She widened her beautiful eyes and looked at Meng Qi, who was wearing a tight black watersuit, landing beside her with a strange man. The man looked very tall, dressed in black, and his face was pale. Even though his clothes and hair were wet and his expression was a little twisted, it still couldn't hide his handsome face. "Help, help." Meng Qi pushed the black-clothed man to Lu Qingran. She shivered and her teeth chattered a few times. The cold pool water was really too cold. Even with the help of Chuan, she still couldn't stand it with her qi refining cultivation. She really had to improve her cultivation as soon as possible. Meng Qi exhaled, stuffed 2 more Chuan into her mouth, and sat down cross-legged. She waited for her spiritual aura to recover, then stood up and approached the black-clothed man. Lu Qingran obediently supported the other party and laid him flat on the ground. When Meng Qi recovered, she had already examined the man. Seeing Meng Qi open her eyes, she quickly asked, "Junior Marshal Sister Meng, who is this person? He's going to be your suitor soon." Meng Qi glanced at Lu Qingran and didn't say anything. She narrowed her eyes slightly and tried to recall. In her memory, this guy did not appear so early. This fellow only appeared beside Lu Qingran because the talkative fox had appeared. No. Meng Qi suddenly remembered that he did not dive to the bottom of the cold lake in his previous life. Perhaps he was secretly recuperating here at that time. Perhaps it was at that time that Lu Qingran saw him. Junior Marshal Sister Meng Qi. After the poisoning incident, Lu Qingran seemed to be a little afraid of her. She looked at Meng Qi, whose eyes flickered slightly, and asked cautiously, "What happened to him?" "Qi deviation," Meng Qi said calmly. She bent down to examine the black-robed man's body. Just now, in the cold pond, she had already felt the rampaging and chaotic spiritual energy in his body. Now that they were on the shore, the feeling was even more obvious. As soon as Meng Qi placed his fingers on the other party's wrist, his fingers were instantly flung away. The power of a cultivator at the peak of the gold core stage was not something that Meng Qi, a little qi disciple, could withstand. The black-robed man's name was Qin Xiumo, and he came from one of the 3 major sects in the southern land. The cultivators in the southern land were more special. Most of them cultivated both sword and technique. The sect that Qin Xiumo belonged to was one of the best. The spells he cultivated were of the ice lineage. At this time, the spiritual energy was flowing in the opposite direction, and a cold chill came. Meng Qi pinched the spell and slowly pressed it on the other party's wrist again. As soon as her fingertips touched it, it seemed that her fingers began to freeze, and in an instant, even her whole arm seemed to be frozen. She frowned slightly. In her previous life, when she met Qin Xiumo, her cultivation and medical skills were higher than now. Then now, Lu Qingran suddenly exclaimed. She looked at Meng Qi's hand that was pressed on Qin Xiumo's wrist, and a faint white frost condensed on the back of her hand. The white frost instantly froze, and even Meng Qi's arm froze. "Meng Shimai, are you all right?" She raised her eyes to look at Meng Qi. Do you want a warm jade? Meng Qi waved her other hand. She looked at Lu Qingran. Do you know the art of meditation? Yes. What realm? Realm 1, Lu Qingran said with a red face. The art of meditation could help organize the occasionally chaotic Ling energy in the body. It wasn't just medical cultivation. Many Xiuzhe in the 3,000 worlds knew it. This spell was not very useful for Xiuzhe who did not have high cultivation. Lu Qingran had not used it after learning it. Right now, she was only at Realm 1, and was no different from when she had just learned it. Meng Qi, she did not say anything and stuffed 2 more warm spring jades into her mouth. That arm that was almost completely frozen shook lightly, and shattered the thin ice. The art of meditation is very useful, Meng Qi said coolly. You should cultivate it. Lu Qingran stilled. She was the direct disciple of the sect master of Cool Breeze Valley, and had been favored by her master from the moment she entered the sect. She was known as the most talented disciple of Cool Breeze Valley. She was indeed very talented. Her cultivation and medical cultivation had progressed very quickly. After entering the sect for 3 years, she had left many of her senior martial brothers and sisters behind her. Now that she had successfully entered Juji, her medical cultivation was almost at the peak of 2nd grade. Her master praised her greatly, and her fellow disciples also revered her. Other than Chu Tianfeng, who had inexplicably changed his attitude during this period of time, she had never suffered any grievances. Right now, Meng Qi had no intention of reprimanding her. But the other's indifferent tone made her blush instantly, as if she had done something particularly shameful. Shamai Meng Qi. Lu Qingran asked with some dissatisfaction, what realm is your art of meditation? Meng Qi had only entered the sect for half a year. She did not believe that the other could cultivate such a spell to a high level. Meng Qi glanced at her. 3rd realm. Lu Qingran was silent and didn't say anything. For a spell like the art of meditation, Shamai Meng Qi, who had only entered the sect for half a year, could cultivate it to the 3rd realm. It was really. Therefore, although the other party's talent was not as good as hers, she could detoxify Chu Tianfeng when he was injured last time, and she could only watch helplessly. Meng Qi didn't say anything else. She sat down cross-legged again, her right hand holding the art of meditation, and placed it on Qin Shumo's forehead. She didn't dare to be rash. She probed bit by bit, sorting out the chaotic spiritual aura in his body like a battlefield. At the edge of the cold pond, cold wind blew. In less than half an hour, Meng Qi's forehead was already soaked with a thin layer of sweat. But the hand she placed on Qin Shumo's forehead was once again frozen by a thin layer of ice. Ooh! Meng Qi, who had her eyes closed, suddenly snorted coldly, and a stream of blood flowed down from the corner of her mouth. Shamai. Lu Qingran hurriedly stepped forward to support her swaying body and asked worriedly, Are you okay? Of course not. Meng Qi gasped and slowly opened her eyes. The sweat on her forehead instantly froze, and even her eyelashes were covered with thin icicles. You. Meng Qi took back her hand. You watch over him first. She closed her eyes and meditated for a moment. After a while, Meng Qi stood up again. Shamai Meng, you should rest for a while more, Lu Qingran said, looking at her worriedly. Meng Qi shook her head. If this continued, Qin Shumo would still die. She stood up and circled around him. I want to go into the cold pond again. She threw a few more spring nuans into her mouth and tightened her water suit. But Shamai, Lu Qingran still wanted to speak, but Meng Qi had already dove into the cold pond like a fish. She was going to pick some cold skygrass. This thing usually grew in cold places and was not uncommon. There was a large patch at the bottom of the cold pond. Meng Qi had seen records of this in the sect's library. At the same time, by the cold pond, Lu Qingran knelt with some terror next to Qin Shumo. She looked dazedly at the man's pale but handsome face, and at the other's bloodless lips. Just now, Meng Qi Shamai had been using the art of meditation to heal the other. Supposedly, he had gone mad. Gone mad, Lu Qingran's brow furrowed slightly. She knew that Lianqi and Zhuji Xiuzhe usually would not have this kind of situation. So this person was at least Jindan Xiuzhe? Then Meng Qi Shamai could heal him. She had really cultivated the art of meditation to realm 3 and was so powerful. Lu Qingran sat dazedly for a moment, her eyes flashing. She closed her eyes, her right hand forming the spell of the art of meditation, and pressed a dot of light on Qin Shimo's forehead. Lu Qingran's finger had just touched the other's forehead when it seemed to have been bitten. She only felt a bone-piercing chill, so much so that even her bone marrow felt like it was about to be frozen, from where she touched the man's skin. Her entire arm did not seem to belong to her, even with the warm jade that Shufu had given her to protect her. In that moment, she seemed to be in the deepest part of the cold pond. A bone-chilling coldness that made people feel pain surrounded her. Lu Qingran screamed, her head dizzy, her entire body falling towards Qin Shimo. Ua! Her upper body fell on the other's body. Qin Shimo, who had been unconscious, suddenly moved his fingers. Bai Mengshu. His body twitched, and his head shook along with it. His eyelashes trembled, and his eyes that had been closed for many days slowly opened. The moment he opened his eyes, the sunlight pierced Qin Shimo's eyes. Where was this? For a moment, countless thoughts flashed through his mind. The betrayal of a good friend he thought he had treated with all his heart. The pain of spiritual aura leaking out after failing to pass the tribulation. The madness of his body as if it was about to explode. Then, he vaguely remembered that he had escaped. He used the life-saving magic treasure that Shufu had given him to escape to a strange place. There was a cold pond there, and in the cold pond, there was a spring of cold spring spiritual dew that was very useful to him. He tied himself there, wanting to use the cold spring spiritual dew to pacify the spiritual aura in his body. Then he fainted. Now Qin Shimo opened his eyes again, looking at the sky. The sunlight poured down like water, falling on his body that had been soaked in the cold pond for many days. His consciousness recovered slightly, and he was surprised to find that the spiritual aura that had been crazily running around in his body and wanting to devour its master seemed to be slightly better. Was the cold spring spiritual dew working? Then now a gust of wind blew, and a soft strand of hair rose up, brushing Qin Shimo's firm jaw. His body also gradually regained consciousness. Qin Shimo slowly lowered his head, and saw Lu Qingran lying on top of him, seemingly unconscious. Was it her who saved him? Although he had woken up, it was still very difficult for him to move. Lu Qingran was lying on top of him, her head of black hair draped over her shoulders, even covering a small part of her small face. Only her small and delicate chin and her sweet cherry lips were exposed. Right now, her lips were white from the cold, and a thin layer of ice could be seen on her bloodless face and hair. Qin Shimo knew at a glance that this had happened because she had been injured by his spiritual aura. A trace of gentleness flashed through his originally cold and hard eyes. Was it this girl who saved him? She didn't even hesitate to hurt herself. Oh! Lu Qingran wasn't unconscious for too long. She withdrew her hand very quickly. She had only fainted because of the sudden impact. She slowly opened her eyes and found that she was actually leaning on the chest of the strange man just now. Lu Qingran's face reddened, and she slowly sat up. She suddenly widened her eyes in surprise, and was caught off guard by a pair of deep, dark eyes. Ah! Lu Qingran was very surprised. You're awake. Qin Shimo hadn't moved yet, but he still gently blinked his eyes. His heart softened. The girl in front of him had a pair of beautiful and clean eyes like a fawn's. She looked young and innocent. The joyful expression on her face didn't seem fake. She was really worried about him. And it was most likely that she was trying to save him. Meng Qi didn't swim for long at the bottom of the cold lake, and soon found the cold sky grass. She quickly picked a lot of it, and only when she almost couldn't stand the cold did she return to the shore. With a splash, Meng Qi broke out of the water again. She shook off the water droplets on her body, and her teeth chattered twice. It was too cold. The cold lake was really not a place for people to stay. Meng Qi quickly walked back to Qin Shimo's side. Meng Qi Shamai. Lu Qingran hurriedly stood up, and said in surprise, "He's awake." Oh! Meng Qi was expressionless from the cold, and responded carelessly. She lowered her head, and coincidentally met Qin Shimo's eyes. Since she had already started to save him, She might as well save him to the end. Meng Qi thought. In any case, from the matter of Chu Tianfeng, the method of collecting spirit stones was useful. I can cure you. She looked at Qin Shomor. But you have to pay spirit stones. She quickly calculated, and quickly said, 108th grade spirit stones. There were Xiuzhe everywhere in the 3,000 worlds, and there were as many Jindan as dogs. But Qin Shomor's life was still quite valuable. After all, he wasn't just a genius Xiuzhe. After surviving this calamity, he quickly rose up. In less than 5 years, he would break through Yuanying and successfully enter the spirit-severing stage. He became one of the Xiuzhe who improved his cultivation the fastest in the world. Later, he even returned to the sect, killed his good friend who betrayed him in the past, and became the sect leader of one of the 3 major sects in the southern border. Meng Qi didn't know what happened after that. A spirit-severing cultivator could already be called an expert in the 3,000 worlds. Qin Shomor was an expert among experts. Shamai Meng. Lu Qingran was a little anxious when she heard Meng Qi's words. 108th grade, 8th grade spirit stones? This was a huge amount of wealth that many disciples of Cool Breeze Valley couldn't obtain in their entire lives. Even the sect leader of Cool Breeze Valley had probably never seen so many spirit stones. Meng Qi Shamai didn't ask for so many spirit stones when she cured Chu Tianfeng's poison last time. Is it? Meng Qi's cold gaze swept over. Lu Qingran shrank her neck. Is it too much? She still remembered how the poison made people feel painful and itchy, and how their faces were covered in pus. She didn't dare to offend this Shamai. Ha! Qin Shomor made a sound from his throat. His gaze turned cold again. The young deer girl called this person Shamai. The two came from the same sect, but one was kind-hearted, gentle, and cute. The other was cold and only knew how to ask for money. As expected, even if they had the same master, they would teach disciples with completely different personalities. Meng Qi ignored Lu Qingran. She looked at Qin Shomor and said lightly, if you agree, blink. Qin Shomor couldn't move at all, but his gaze still showed faint disdain. He slowly blinked. If she could really cure him, what were spirit stones? This girl was not only ruthless, but also stupid. She probably would never know what she missed out on for these spirit stones. Chapter 26. Meng Qi turned to Lu Qingran and said, Senior Sister Lu, please leave. Ah, okay. Lu Qingran looked worriedly at Meng Qi and then at Qin Shomor who was lying on the ground. Although she was embarrassed just now, she didn't doubt junior sister Meng's words at all. This junior sister who had only been in the sect for half a year was far stronger than she imagined. As Lu Qingran walked down the mountain, she looked back at Meng Qi again. She suddenly trembled. A junior sister in the Qi refining stage was so powerful. Was there really no problem? Did Elder Yang, who admired junior sister Meng very much, teach her something in private? Meng Qi was still standing in the same place. She waited until Lu Qingran's figure completely disappeared before she turned back and walked to the cold pool. The small medicine knife was very tough and sharp. Meng Qi quickly drew 3 overlapping parts of the same array on the ground. She took out a small bottle from her storage bag and sprinkled the powder along the 3 arrays dug out by the small medicine knife. Ran Wen. Finally, she took out more than a dozen 4th-grade spirit stones and placed them in the 3 arrays. Qin Shomor tried his best to watch Meng Qi from the corner of his eye. Meng Qi was still wearing a black water suit. She was slim and had a slim waist and a slender back. Her hair was wet from the cold pool water and she looked a little embarrassed, but she still looked very calm. Qin Shomor didn't know what she was doing. He just watched her inlay the spirit stones into the array one by one. Then she sprinkled the medicine and led the cold pool water into the array. A faint smell of medicine came with the wind. It was a little bitter, but it was not annoying. Meng Qi finally took out the cold stargrass in the cold pool. She only took out 3 small bottles of essence from a large handful of dark green grass leaves. She poured the essence of the cold stargrass into the center of the array. Then she turned back and dragged Qin Shomor over there. She was slim and looked especially thin in the black water suit. Qin Shomor couldn't move, so he could only let the other party drag him forward. Before this betrayal, he was also a proud son of heaven, a cultivation genius, and had been pampered and spoiled as he grew up. He had never been treated like this before. He dragged his back across the shore of the cold pond, which was still covered in gravel. The spiritual energy in his body was already in a mess, like a volcano, ready to erupt at any time. However, Meng Qi muttered, "So heavy." Earlier, when she was carrying Qin Xiumor in the cold pond, with the help of the pond's buoyancy, she didn't feel that Qin Xiumor was so heavy. Qin Xiumor, a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. Compared to the other girl who was as gentle as a deer, this girl was different. This woman was simply too unlikable. Meng Qi finally dragged Qin Xiumor to the 3 arrays. "Don't use too much strength." Although Meng Qi knew that the other party had no control over his body, he still reminded him. She bent over and put one arm through Qin Xiumor's back and the other under his knee. Then, she used her strength and carried him in a princess carry. Qin Xiumor. His pale face was tinged with a hint of red. He never thought that he would be carried in a princess carry by a girl who looked at most 17 or 18 years old. The other party was also so heavy. Meng Qi muttered again. She quickly placed Qin Xiumor where the 3 arrays overlapped, and then placed him in the middle. Meng Qi exhaled, stood up straight, and wiped her sweat. When she met Qin Xiumor in her previous life, he could already move on his own. However, his spiritual energy was still a mess, and he was no different from a cripple. Unexpectedly, this time, the person she met was Qin Xiumor, who had just suffered from qi deviation. Meng Qi had no choice. She took away the cold spring spiritual dew so that the other party couldn't continue to recover. She had no choice but to do this. This array was the one she had set up in the room as a protective array. She found that the effect of the medicine increased a lot after the array's effect. Now, her medical cultivation was lower than when she met Qin Xiumor in her previous life. Meng Qi had an idea on how to sort out his spiritual energy. However, she was afraid that if her cultivation was low, it would have the opposite effect. After all, qi deviation was not an external injury. If her medical cultivation was too weak, it would only harm others and herself. Meng Qi set up a large protective array outside the 3 arrays, and sprinkled the powder that made Lu Qingran so embarrassed. Although it wouldn't be of much use if she met a powerful person, Cool Breeze Valley had come out in full force recently. There weren't any powerful cultivators within 100 miles. They could deal with anyone below Foundation establishment. Relax your body now. After Meng Qi finished busily, Qin Xiumor looked at her coldly. Then she sat cross-legged in the center of one of the arrays. Her right hand formed the meditation art. When she met Qin Xiumor in her previous life, her meditation art was already at Realm 3 perfection. After curing Qin Xiumor, she directly entered Realm 4. This time, she had just broken through to Realm 3, and was slightly weaker than before. Hopefully, the array would be useful. Meng Qi reached out and pressed a hand on Qin Xiumor's forehead. Don't think about anything. It may be uncomfortable, but don't have any thoughts of resistance. As she finished, her fingers touched the other's forehead. A wave of coldness accompanied by a murderous intent came from the other's body. Meng Qi's body shook, and a thin layer of sweat appeared on her forehead. The sweat quickly froze into ice, and then melted. Her hair was already wet, and now, a few strands of hair were stuck to her forehead, causing her to look no better than Qin Xiumor. The meditation art consumed more Ling energy than the clear breeze art. Meng Qi quickly opened her eyes, and her arms fell weakly. She exhaled, her hands facing the sky, and started to recover her Ling energy. She repeated this dozens of times until her Ling energy was used up, and then she recovered, and then continued the treatment. In the array, the essence of the frigid stargrass gradually became scarce, and in the end, only a faint medicinal aura was left in the array. The sun gradually set in the west. The sky became hazy, and dusk began to envelop the cold pool at the top of the mountain. Meng Qi's hair was still wet. She had long been used to repeatedly using her empty spiritual energy to practice the same technique. She didn't feel bored at all. Lying in the array, Qin Xiumor's expression slowly changed. Meng Qi's slightly cold and slender fingers fell on his forehead repeatedly. At first, he didn't feel anything, but later, he seemed to be able to feel the faint warmth coming from her fingertips. What was hidden under the girl's cold skin was also fresh flesh and blood with vitality. The Ling energy in his body was being sorted out very slowly. Compared to the domineering aura at the beginning, after half a day of Meng Qi's efforts, it gradually became a little smoother. Qin Shomor could even feel that his arms weren't as stiff as before. The slightly cold fingers on his forehead trembled slightly, and he knew that Meng Qi was exhausted again. Sure enough, the fingers quickly retracted, and Meng Qi exhaled heavily. Beads of sweat slowly slid down her forehead and rolled down along her small chin. With a soft plop, it fell on Qin Shomor's forehead. Meng Qi had already closed her eyes, and her whole body was trembling slightly. Her spiritual energy was severely overdrawn. Moreover, Qin Shomor's spiritual energy was overbearing, and a Qi refinement stage cultivator was too weak in front of him. At this time, she only felt that her body was empty, as if thousands of cold little needles were pricking her meridians. The cold air was pressing. After a while, she slowly exhaled. She lowered her head and looked at Qin Shomor. Meng Qi stood up and staggered. She shook her head and barely stabilized her body. I can't. Meng Qi waved her hand. She looked around, then leaned over and pulled Qin Shomor out of the array. She stretched out her foot and stepped on the ground, destroying the array so that its original appearance couldn't be seen. Without the cold stargrass, I can't withstand your spiritual energy. Meng Qi seemed to be talking to herself, but also seemed to be talking to Qin Shomor. That's it for today. She looked around again. The edge of the cold pool was barren. Meng Qi remembered. She dragged Qin Shomor in the direction of a pile of large stones on the edge of the cold pool. There was a small hut there. Occasionally, the sect's elders or sect masters would come here to cultivate and stay there. Recently, they weren't here, and no one would come here. Meng Qi quickly found the hut and stuffed Qin Shomor inside. Cool Breeze Valley now had the protective array left by Elder Zunyang, and also the protective array of Cool Breeze Valley itself. There was no danger from the outside world for the time being. She still set up 2 arrays around the house, then returned to the door of the small stone hut and said to Qin Shomor, I'll come back tomorrow. After saying that, Meng Qi turned around and left. In the room, Qin Shomor's expression changed unpredictably. At this time, the sky was almost completely dark. Although he was possessed and couldn't use magic arts, he couldn't control the sword. But his eyesight was still there. There was no problem with seeing things in the dark. He looked at the girl's slender back as she quickly disappeared into the night. The fingers that were originally frozen by his side slowly moved. In fact, a little earlier, around the 17th or 18th time when Meng Qi exhausted her spiritual energy to rest, his fingers had regained feeling and strength, and he could move slightly. However, at that time, Qin Shomor was lying in the array, and he could see Meng Qi's chin when he raised his head. He saw her thin lips pursed tightly because she was serious. There were fine beads of sweat on the tip of her tall nose. Her eyelashes were trembling because of exhaustion, and beads of sweat were sliding down her forehead. All of this seemed so familiar, but it also seemed a little strange in a trance. Qin Shomor's whole body froze, and he forgot to move. Moreover, at that time, the spiritual energy in his body was still in a mess, and he couldn't do anything except move his fingers. Qin Shomor looked at the ink-black night outside the stone hut. The stars began to climb into the sky, and he breathed in the cold air unique to the cold pond, which was rich in spiritual energy. That slender hand with the faint scent of medicine seemed to still be on his forehead. His eyes focused and fell on the door. The young man in black stood about 5 feet away from the door of the stone hut, looking at him warily and coldly. Chu Tianfeng? Qin Shomor's eyes flashed with a touch of darkness. He was also here. Qin Shomor. Chu Tianfeng took a step forward, and stared at him with cold eyes. Qin Shomor's mind raced. They had never met before, but he knew who the other party was because, then what about Chu Tianfeng? I was wondering why she didn't even accompany her precious little white tiger and came to the cold pond. So it was you. Chu Tianfeng sneered. Qin Shomor had already calmed down. He had been through countless storms before being betrayed by his good friend. It was difficult for anything to move him anymore. He didn't know who the she Chu Tianfeng was talking about was. Was it Lu Qingran? Or HMPH? Chu Tianfeng looked at Qin Shomor. The proud young man snorted and looked at him disdainfully. What? Qin Shomor asked. He frowned. He had been soaking in the cold pond for almost a month, and had been unconscious for a month. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse and rough, as if it had been rubbed by rough sandpaper. Even he almost couldn't recognize himself. Don't worry. Chu Tianfeng lowered his head and looked at the array on the ground. Meng Qi had been done very secretly, and it couldn't be seen at all in the night. But he had been watching from afar, watching her busying herself outside the stone house for a while before leaving, humming a little tune. I won't hurt you, Chu Tianfeng said indifferently. I swear in the name of Burning Sky Palace's young palace master. You can rest assured. He saw Qin Shomor's indifferent expression, and didn't know whether he believed him or not. The two of them had once been very familiar with each other, and for the sake of Lu Qingran's affection, they had fought openly and secretly countless times. In the end, he was defeated by the other party. But Chu Tianfeng's lips curled up, and he laughed bitterly. But they probably didn't expect that neither of them would be the final winner. Stop pretending. He looked at Qin Shomor. I know you remember everything, just like me. Qin Shomor's eyes flickered, and he finally reacted. He asked hoarsely, remember what? If I want to kill you right now, I only need. Chu Tianfeng raised his hand, and a small flame so red it was almost purple appeared at his fingertip. He was a Jindan Shouja, and had no pain or injury, and was very active. Even if he lost to Qin Shomor in terms of cultivation level, the other was lying on the ground, and it was difficult for him to move. But I won't kill you. Chu Tianfeng looked at him, and said word by word, in the end, we lived and died together, and can be considered friends in life, death, and life. Chu Tianfeng gritted his teeth as he spat out these words. His entire body trembled as though he was thinking of some terrifying memory. Under the moonlight, the proud youth's expression turned pale. Qin Shomor's body also trembled. The two of them were clearly the best of this generation of young Shouja in the 3,000 worlds. He and Chu Tianfeng were now Jindan Shouja. In a few more years, the two of them would break through, from Yuanying to Fenshen. They were almost invincible in their generation, but they couldn't even compare to one of that person's hands. She. Chu Tianfeng said one word, and then lowered his head in thought for a moment. A long while later, he raised his head, his eyes brighter than before. Meng Qi, he said, also died at that person's hands. He believed the lies of that madman from West Jie, and thought that he could save. Chu Tianfeng gritted his teeth. You were completely unconscious at the time, and didn't see. That person used us 2 pieces of trash as bait to lure her here, and she was still, that idiot Meng Qi. He suddenly raised his arm, and quickly used his sleeve to wipe his eyes. Chu Tianfeng took a deep breath, the rims of his eyes still slightly red. My father gave up on me, and Burning Sky Palace had a new young palace master. She said she liked me, and liked you, she would only cry in that person's arms. In the end, only Meng Qi was willing to save us, only she. Qin Shomor's jaw suddenly tightened. His fingers gently curled up, clenching into a fist. He knew what Chu Tianfeng was saying. It was just that he was still a little confused right now. Just as Meng Qi was using the heart meditation art again and again, patiently sorting out his qi thread by thread. Countless fragments of memories flooded into his mind. There was Meng Qi, himself, Lu Qingran, and this. Chu Tianfeng. Right now, he still couldn't completely string those fragments together, but he knew that those fragments, so clear as if he had personally experienced them, shouldn't have appeared by chance. Now that he heard Chu Tianfeng's words, they sounded a little incoherent. Qin Shomor's heart stirred, and something slowly merged those fragments into one. I haven't forgotten those 3 months of hell on earth, and you remember it too. Chu Tianfeng didn't continue to approach the door. He had already regained his cool. If not for the remnant wisp of red at the corners of his eyes, one simply wouldn't be able to see that he had been so agitated just now. So I won't hurt you. live on and become stronger. His hands hanging by his side clenched into fists. And then protect her. After he finished speaking, he took out a porcelain bottle from his storage bag and tossed it to Qin Shumo. The sixth realm tranquil pill refined by the elder of Burning Sky Palace's medical hall. It can also help suppress qi when a nascent soul cultivator suffers from qi deviation, Chu Tianfeng said hoarsely. Qin Shumo's body stiffened, and the porcelain bottle had already landed on his chest. He raised his hand to open the bottle cork. The sixth realm tranquil pill's medicinal ingredients were secondary, but this required a spirit-severing cultivator with sixth realm medical skills to refine. It was extremely rare in any sect in the 3,000 worlds. After all, there were spirit-severing cultivators, but sixth realm medical skills were very rare. If Meng Qi didn't die, he might break through fifth realm and enter sixth realm within a year or two. He expressionlessly took the pill and slowly swallowed it. Chu Tianfeng's words just now made him completely believe that the other party wouldn't harm him. Because in the future, they would have an extremely terrifying common enemy. Chu Tianfeng was right. They could be considered friends of life and death. When the pill entered his mouth, it instantly turned into warmth and rolled down. His dantian, which had just felt as if it had been pierced by 1,000 knives, was gradually surrounded by warmth. With her help and this tranquil pill, Chu Tianfeng was still standing at the door. Don't let me down. He turned around and prepared to leave. Wait. Qin Shumo opened his mouth and called out to him. Is there something else? Chu Tianfeng didn't turn around. Do you have spirit stones? Chu Tianfeng was stunned for a moment, but he quickly reacted. He finally felt a little happier. It turned out that he wasn't the first person to be asked for money. Meng Qi wasn't biased. He still treated everyone the same way. How much do you want? Chu Tianfeng also roughly knew Qin Shumo's current situation. He must have been injured by his close friend during the tribulation and suffered qi deviation, so he escaped alone. He probably didn't bring anything out, and the things on his body should have all been struck to ashes by the tribulation lightning. He was lucky to be able to survive. 100 8th grade spirit stones. Qin Shumo was a little embarrassed, which was rare. He turned his head away, not wanting to meet Chu Tianfeng's gaze. Chu Tianfeng frowned, then flew into a rage. 8th grade spirit stones? 100. Meng Qi asked you for them? Qin Shumo nodded. Chu Tianfeng almost went crazy with anger. Why? You're an 8th grade spirit stone? He was a 6th grade spirit stone? And Qin Shumo had 100 of them. What about him? And it was calculated by the stones. It didn't sound impressive at all. Why? Why did he take so little from him? How was Qin Shumo better than him? Even if he was indeed very strong in the future, he was still useless now. Qin Shumo, an idea suddenly flashed in his mind, and he shook his head. No need. He looked at Chu Tianfeng calmly. Suddenly, he thought of a better idea. Instead, she waited for the legendary ruthless and arbitrary new emperor, the extremely obedient imperial husband in her dream. Su Wan. The little moneygrubber who only wanted to open a shop and didn't sink into the mystery of the dream X, the ruthless and cold crown prince who was taught how to behave in the dream. Chapter 27. Chu Tianfeng looked at him suspiciously. He immediately reacted. You're too despicable. Why didn't he think of that? Qin Shumo was indeed despicable as always. No wonder he rarely won when they fought countless times in the past. Protect me. Qin Shumo didn't care what he was thinking at all. He closed his eyes. The tranquil pill's medicinal properties gradually melted, and the warmth gradually became hotter and hotter. It was like a raging fire raging in his body. He suddenly groaned. Chu Tianfeng stood at the door gloating. Qin Shumo must be extremely uncomfortable to use such a medicine above his level. The degree of pain was no less than qi deviation again. But the other party would definitely use it. A tranquil pill of this level was very rare. And if he didn't use it, he could only rely on Meng Qi to sort out his spiritual aura bit by bit. He remembered everything, and he also remembered that this process lasted for almost 3 months. Qin Shomor went from being a cripple to recovering his cultivation level, then undergoing the tribulation again and successfully breaking through. Meng Qi's grace of rebirth was worth it for him to be in such pain again. Because the more painful it was, the more he would remember it. Proud sons of heaven like them were pampered and raised since they were young. Perhaps they were really stupid and wouldn't know who was really good until they died once. They also couldn't see through the kindness hidden under some people's seemingly distant expressions. Meng Qi hugged little white tiger and slept until dawn the next day. She overused her strength yesterday. When she opened her eyes and laid on the bed, she still remembered the slight trembling of her arms after she lost all her strength. Too low of a cultivation level was indeed a big problem. Meng Qi casually rubbed little Qi, who was lying lazily beside her. She knew her shortcomings. Her aptitude in cultivation could only be considered average. Meng Qi turned over and sat up. Later on, from foundation establishment to golden core, her master helped her a lot. Little Qi was awakened by her movements. He changed his position and continued to lie on the bamboo bed. He looked weak the whole day yesterday, but he looked a little better today. He stared at Meng Qi with his blue eyes, his claws resting beside her. Meng Qi reached out and held little Qi's little paw. Dark red blood stains stained the white fur on his front paws. Meng Qi carefully cleaned his wounds every day, wrapped them in soft and clean new cloth, and used the best hemostatic medicine she could make. At most, it would only slow down the bleeding of the wound slightly. She took out 2 pills from her bracelet storage bag and stuffed them into little Qi's mouth. Then, she took out the book that Xue Jinwen had given her. Meng Qi carefully read the book from beginning to end. Jiyu was the biggest problem. Other than that, she jumped off the bed. Unfortunately, Elder Yang was not in the sect right now. Otherwise, she might be able to ask him for his opinion. Meng Qi knew that many poisons were very troublesome to detoxify. But if she didn't detoxify it, it would be slightly easier to suppress the toxicity temporarily. The toxicity of jackdaw grass was not strong. After little Qi was poisoned, his front paws were bleeding, but his life was not in danger. But if this continued, he would become weaker and weaker. And if the poison stayed in the body for too long, it would easily cause some irreversible damage to the body. Now that she couldn't find Jiyu, she could think of a way to temporarily suppress the toxicity of jackdaw grass. Meng Qi made up her mind to clean up and go to the cold lake first. She worked hard for half a day yesterday, but the spiritual energy in Qin Shomor's body was still in a mess. She was thinking about this on the way to the cold lake. Meng Qi remembered that when she met Qin Shomor in her previous life, he should have already come out of the cold lake. But no one took the cold spring spiritual dew. He spent almost a year relying on the cold spring spiritual dew to make the spiritual energy in his body slightly more obedient. At least he could control his body. When Meng Qi met him, he was already a foundation establishment cultivator. Even so, it took him 3 whole months to completely pacify the chaotic spiritual energy in his body. 156N net. This process was very painful. The only good thing was that her meditation secrets had successfully broken through and entered Realm 4 during this process. Compared to Realm 3, Realm 4 meditation secrets only seemed to be 1 realm higher. But spells were all like this. The higher the level, the harder it was to improve. If a Shouja cultivated on their own, it would take at least a year or 2 to raise a spell from Realm 3 to Realm 4. And that would require them to be very diligent and practice day after day. As Meng Qi thought, she walked to the stone house next to the cold lake. She first looked at the ground. The protective formation she had set up showed no signs of being moved. Clearwind Valley had not warned of an enemy invasion last night. Then Qin Shomor, HM? Meng Qi stilled and looked at the empty room. Are you looking for me? A deep and slightly cold male voice suddenly came from behind Meng Qi. She quickly took a step forward. Without thinking, she flipped her hand and the small silver medicine knife was already in her hand. Meng Qi turned around. Qin Shomor, still dressed in a black robe, stood outside the door. The man who couldn't move yesterday was not only standing in front of Meng Qi, but also alive. Even his complexion looked a bit more rosy than before. You. Meng Qi looked him up and down a few times. She subconsciously wanted to reach out and check the other's physical condition. At that moment, she was full of curiosity. How did the other party suddenly get better? Was there a powerful doctor who treated him and made him get better overnight? Or did he take some panacea? The moment her fingers were about to touch Qin Shomo's wrist, Meng Qi suddenly reacted. This guy's temper was terrible. After experiencing the betrayal of his best friend, he didn't trust anyone. Except for Lu Qingran. If Qin Shomo had recovered, a cultivator at the peak of the gold core stage could directly slap Meng Qi into serious injury. She quickly withdrew her hand. She still couldn't control her curiosity. Meng Qi stared at Qin Shomo. Her lips moved, but she didn't ask anything in the end. Chu Tianfeng was just arrogant and conceited. This man was cruel and heartless. After Qin Shomo was cured by her, his cultivation level successfully broke through and smoothly entered the nascent soul stage. Before he went through the tribulation at the peak of the nascent soul stage, in order to eliminate all factors that might affect the tribulation, Qin Shomo returned to the Southland alone to slaughter the family of his best friend who betrayed him at that time. At that time, the Dao partner who betrayed his best friend was pregnant and about to give birth. However, she found that she had been poisoned by a very strange insect. It was very likely that she couldn't even save the child. Meng Qi happened to be picking herbs in the Southland. After seeing the news that the other party was looking for a doctor, she was curious and went to save them. Meng Qi still remembered the way Qin Shomo walked in front of her like a bloodthirsty Azura. Even if it had been a long time since then. Later, Meng Qi frowned. Although Qin Shomo didn't kill his best friend's Dao partner, the child was sent far away after being born. No one knew where he had sent the child, whether he was still alive, or whether he had already been eradicated by him. However, at that time, no one knew how many cultivators he had killed. The murderous intent and the smell of blood was so strong that it made people want to vomit. Meng Qi still remembered Qin Shomo clearly. He let go of his best friend's Dao partner. Of course, it was not because of Meng Qi. In fact, at that time, Qin Shomo believed that it was his senior martial sister Lu Qingran who saved him when he was possessed by the devil. He was very unfamiliar with Meng Qi. He gave face to Meng Qi because Meng Qi and Lu Qingran used to be from the same sect. Especially when he saw Meng Qi in the mansion of his best friend, who had betrayed him and almost caused him to die of qi deviation. Qin Shomo was not very polite to her. These thoughts flashed through Meng Qi's mind. She instinctively stepped back and retracted her hand. However, she still held the small silver medicine knife and looked at Qin Shomo warily. For a moment, she was also a little annoyed. Why didn't she learn her lesson? If Qin Shomo died, then so be it. Why did she? Fine. Meng Qi also knew. If she could do it all over again, she definitely couldn't watch a person die in front of her. She couldn't do it. Qin Shomo closed his eyes. He took a step forward. His originally tense jaw relaxed slightly, and he took the initiative to reach out his hand. You. His voice was slightly hoarse. Do you want to check the condition of my body? Meng Qi, thank you for saving me yesterday. Qin Shomo said again, I'm much better now. He even lowered his voice, trying to sound gentler. Meng Qi still looked at him warily. I can only move, but the spiritual aura in my body is still chaotic. I'll have to trouble you, fellow Daoist. Qin Shomo stood still. Meng Qi had never seen Qin Shomo so polite. She stared at him for a while, then took a step forward, pinched a spell, and probed his wrist. She was really curious. Yesterday, she tried to use a magic formation that could enhance the effect of the medicine, and then with the help of the cold skygrass, it could indeed help her sort out the spiritual aura in Qin Shomo's body. But it wouldn't be that effective. If qi deviation was really so simple, then Qin Shomo, Meng Qi frowned. She was still full of vigilance just now, but as soon as she touched Qin Shomo's wrist, she was immediately attracted by the current situation in his body. This is, she subconsciously asked, tranquil pill? Level 4. No. At least level 5 or level 6 tranquil pill? Qin Shomo was at the peak stage of the gold core realm, and he was already one step away from the nascent soul realm. Level 4 tranquil pill wouldn't be so effective. Even level 5 tranquil pill might not be able to help him recover to this extent in one night. Level 6. Qin Xiaomor didn't hide it from her. TSK. Meng Qi sighed softly, and her eyes revealed a yearning look. An almighty person who could refine level 6 tranquil pills had to be a level 6 medical cultivator, right? With the help of level 6 tranquil pills, it might have taken 3 months, or even longer, to completely cure Qin Xiaomor. Now, it only took about half a month. For Meng Qi, it was much easier. But she didn't understand. If he had the medicine, why didn't he take it in the beginning? If it were someone else, Meng Qi might have asked directly. But she only glanced at Qin Xiaomor. Ever since he was betrayed by his close friend, he had become a man who regarded all kinds of moral constraints in the world as nothing and would do anything to achieve his goals. Even if she asked, he definitely wouldn't tell her. Then, let's continue. Although he had tranquil pills, the spiritual energy in Qin Xiaomor's body was still very chaotic. Right now, he only looked slightly better than ordinary people. He might not even be a match for a cultivator at the lowest level of qi refining stage, such as Meng Qi. Okay. Qin Xiaomor followed Meng Qi back to the edge of the cold pool. He watched the girl busily rearrange the array and then draw in the water of the cold pool. Then, she changed into a black diving suit and jumped into the cold pool. Qin Xiaomor was suddenly moved. After Chu Tianfeng came yesterday, he remembered more and more fragments. The girl's slightly cold fingers with the smell of medicine. Her faint, elegant, and calm voice seemed to have an endless soothing effect. Just as Chu Tianfeng said, later on, almost everyone thought that they were already dead and felt that they couldn't be saved. Meng Qi would still try her best to make a final effort. Qin Xiaomor saw more clearly than Chu Tianfeng. He thought of the curiosity in Meng Qi's eyes that couldn't be concealed when she found that he suddenly got better. She was definitely not curious about him, but why he suddenly got better. Meng Qi's true love was medicine. Qin Xiaomor slowly exhaled. The corners of his lips raised, and he didn't know whether to be disappointed or happy. With a splash, Meng Qi had already come out of the cold pool. She skillfully extracted the essence of the cold skygrass, and then threw a few spirit stones into the array. Be careful not to touch my array. Meng Qi commanded Qin Xiaomor. Sit in the middle. As she spoke, she poured all the essence of the cold skygrass into the array. Qin Xiaomor sat in the middle of the 3 superimposed arrays, and then looked at Meng Qi sitting cross-legged in front of him. Her slender fingers gently placed on his forehead with the cold air of the cold pool. The meditation art penetrated his body again. Carefully and without any impatience, it gathered the spiritual aura in his body that was still messy but not so aggressive. It wasn't until the sun set in the west again that she exhaled a long breath. Meng Qi waved at Qin Xiaomor. That's all for today. She thought for a moment and said, although I have the help of the 6th realm meditation pill, I still can't give you less than 108th stage spirit stones. Gathering and sorting out the spiritual aura is only the first step. To completely cure you, I still need the help of other medicinal pills and spells. Qin Xiaomor nodded. Okay. He promised generously, I can write an IOU first. Meng Qi glanced at him suspiciously. He seemed to have been prepared, and he reached out to Meng Qi. Give me a bamboo slip. After getting the bamboo slip, Qin Xiaomor quickly wrote an IOU for 108th stage spirit stones, branded it with his divine sense imprint, and returned it to Meng Qi. He watched Meng Qi put away the IOU, then continued to say, I was betrayed by a friend, so I can't go back to the sect now. Meng Qi knew this. Qin Xiaomor paused, looked at Meng Qi frankly, and said slowly, this 6th realm meditation pill was given to me by Chu Tianfeng. Almost without hesitation, he betrayed his teammate. Huh. Meng Qi was stunned. In exchange for this pill, I gave him everything I had left. I don't even have a single first-grade spirit stone on me right now. Qin Xiaomor said, I have to find another way to pay you back the 108th stage spirit stones I owe you. Ah. Meng Qi was just about to say that there was no need to rush. Qin Xiaomor said slowly, I can pay the debt with my body. Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it for you. No matter what, I'll do it as long as you ask. He paused, and said frankly and shamelessly, "Anyway, I just don't have money." Chapter 28. Meng Qi was taken aback. No money. She stared blankly at Qin Shomor with a pair of clear eyes. There seemed to be a slightly smug smile in his eyes. The IOU was in her hands. Even if the other party said that he had no money, he definitely couldn't deny it. Some thoughts flashed through Meng Qi's mind. She had never suspected that people like Qin Shomor and Chu Tianfeng would go back on their words. And just now, didn't Qin Shomor mention Chu Tianfeng? Chu Tianfeng sold the level 6 tranquil heart pill to you? Meng Qi asked. Yes. Qin Shomor nodded. You've seen him? Meng Qi asked again. Burning Sky Palace had a special medical hall with high cultivation. It was not strange that they could refine the level 6 tranquil heart pill. However, Chu Tianfeng and Qin Shomor had fought many times for Lu Qingran in her previous life. Meng Qi had seen them fight before. It could not be called a spar, it was a fight to the death. Thoughts flashed through her mind quickly, but her face was calm. She had already treated him to this point. If she did not continue, wouldn't everything be in vain? The water of the cold pond was bone-chilling. Even with Chun Yuan's help, Meng Qi would not feel comfortable. Pay with her body? Ha. Meng Qi was about to speak when her eyes suddenly lit up. How could she have forgotten about that? Meng Qi wanted to cure little Qi's jackdaw grass poison. In addition to those few herbs, she also needed a large amount of jade cicada vine. This thing was available in Burning City, but it was on the jade cicada cliff near Burning City. The spiritual energy on the cliff was thin. It was a dead land near Burning City. It was said that 1,000 years ago, there was a sky demon middle land expert and the elder of Burning City who fought there for 3 days and 3 nights. After the battle, all life within 100 miles was cut off. Normal Shouja could not cultivate there. Normally, Lianqi and Zhuji cultivators could rely on simple transportation talismans to fly at low altitudes. For example, Meng Qi had a paper crane made of folded talisman paper. It could fly with spirit stones as its driving force. It wasn't fast, but it was more convenient than walking on her own. However, Jade Cicada Cliff was different. The Zhuji cultivators there could barely control their talismans. It was impossible for them to fly to the cliff and cut the Jade Cicada vine. Only Jindan Shouja could barely use flying talismans. Of course, when he reached the nascent soul stage, he would be less affected. But a Yuanying Shouja, in a large sect like Burning Sky Palace, could hold the position of elder. They could not be responsible for gathering herbs. This jade cicada vine wasn't some kind of heaven and earth treasure, so it was rarely used when refining pills. Even if the Cloud Immortal Pavilion's pharmacy sold it, the quantity was very small and the price was very expensive. Meng Qi had originally planned to think of a solution when he reached the burnt city, as that was the only place in the east border where the jade cicada vine could be found. If it really didn't work, she could spend spirit stones to hire a Jindan Shouja to help her gather herbs. But the price of hiring a Jindan Shouja would probably not be cheap. Even if she gave them spirit stones, they might not be willing to do something like gathering herbs. She examined Qin Shomor. This guy was already a Jindan Great Circle Shouja. After he was cured of his energy deviation, he should be able to pass the tribulation. 100 Alliance Scroll. Meng Qi's heart suddenly moved. 100 8th grade spirit stones. How many times could she hire a Jindan Great Circle Shouja or a Yuanying Shouja? She just felt that her cultivation was low, and it was inconvenient to do many things. Jindan and Yuanying Shouja of the 3,000 worlds had their own pride. Meng Qi was a Lianqi Shouja. If she wanted to hire them to work for her, it would probably be useless no matter how many spirit stones she spent. All right. She nodded. I will hire you to work for me according to the market price until the 108th grade spirit stones are deducted. Qin Shomor cultivated both sword scriptures and spells. He was very strong. But would he go back on his words? Meng Qi was a little unsure. She had seen how Qin Shomor turned hostile. This guy had no moral standards to restrain him. Meng Qi took out a pill from her storage bag and handed it to Qin Shomor. In order to prevent you from going back on your words, take this pill. Don't worry. She paused. It won't affect you, but I have to suppress the poison for you once a month. Okay. Qin Xiumor reached out to take the pill. Without even asking what would happen to him after the poison acted up, he stuffed the pill into his mouth. Meng Qi, when did Qin Xiumor become so easy to talk to? She looked at him suspiciously. Was this still Qin Xiumor who was later called the Little Demon Lord by the 3,000 Worlds? I will continue to treat you, Meng Qi said expressionlessly. She knew that Qin Xiumor would not return to the southern land before he broke through to the dividing divinity stage. He would stay in the eastern land during this period. If she used it properly, she should be able to obtain many medicinal herbs that she could not collect before because of her cultivation limit. She could also hunt some ferocious beasts. The ferocious beasts that grew in the 3,000 worlds that Meng Qi could not defeat even before she died. There were also many things on the ferocious beasts that could be used as medicine. Before she met Master, she could only run for her life when she encountered ferocious beasts. She could go back and ask how many spirit stones it cost to hire a golden core cultivator. Meng Qi made up her mind. Instead, she looked calmer. Anyway, it was not that she did not want to pay. It was just a change of method. I will come again tomorrow. Meng Qi nodded at Qin Xiumor and turned to leave. Wait. Qin Xiumor stopped her. If it takes too long, remember to calculate the interest. Okay. Meng Qi could not help but look at him again this time. What a mysterious guy. She shook her head. No wonder he was called the Little Demon Lord. She really could not understand his thoughts. She returned to her residence. The sect leader, the elders, and the people of Burning Sky Palace had gone out to fight with the monsters and had not returned yet. Chu Tianfeng, who had returned, did not look worried at all. Meng Qi estimated that the battle had gone smoothly. Meng Qi did not think about it anymore. She reached out and gently pulled little Qi's paw, who was still lying on the bed, and carefully examined his wound. There is no burning feather. I have to find a way to suppress the poison as soon as possible. She reached out and pinched little Qi's ear. They had gotten along well during this period of time. Little Qi now rubbed Meng Qi from time to time, pinched her ear, and stroked her hair. He seemed to be completely helpless. He turned his head slightly. His fluffy little ears moved slightly. He had no intention of breaking free from Meng Qi's touch. Go to sleep. Meng Qi had been busy for most of the day. She also felt tired. She rubbed little Qi's head again and was about to lie down on the bed. Suddenly, there was a rush of footsteps outside the door. Shemai Meng Qi. Shemai, are you here? The person called out to her while knocking on the door. Shemai, I'm Senior Marshal Brother Yu Jianbo. Meng Qi didn't quite remember this person, but she still opened the door for him. Outside the door, she saw a somewhat familiar young and honest male disciple's face. Shemai Meng, it's great that you're here. He said. Shemai Lu Qingran asked you to gather in the main hall. Elder Lu came back injured. She asked us to immediately organize people to go with him. En. Meng Qi strode out of the room. What's going on? She saw Chu Tianfeng wandering around the door after he came back. He didn't seem to have any intention of helping. She thought things were going smoothly. I don't know. Yu Jianbo said, let's go to the main hall first. When Meng Qi arrived, there were already 17 or 18 people standing in the main hall. Elder Lu was standing in the middle. He was another core formation elder of Cool Breeze Valley. At this time, there were obvious bloodstains on his arm, and he didn't look very good. Long story short, Elder Lu said. This time, Burning Heaven Palace received news that cracks appeared in the demon barrier not far from our Cool Breeze Valley. Demonic creatures took the opportunity to invade. As everyone knows, we went to exterminate the demons under the leadership of Elder Zunyang and Sect Master. The beginning was quite smooth. Originally, we thought we'd be able to completely exterminate those demonic creatures in about 20 days at most. Elder Lu said almost without stopping, who knew that it wasn't the demons who invaded Cool Breeze Valley this time? Several yarrow cultivators were hiding in the dark. They took advantage of the fierce battle between us and the demonic creatures to launch a sneak attack from behind. Many disciples of Burning Heaven Palace and the sect were injured. Although the yarrow cultivators were powerful, there weren't many of them. It's just that the disciples there had to fight the demons and couldn't spare the time to treat the injured disciples. So you'll come with me now and bring the medicinal pills you usually use. After Elder Lu finished speaking, he waved his hand. We'll go back and prepare the medicinal pills we need, mainly for Ganlin and Beiming. If we have cool breeze pills, we can also prepare some for external wounds. He paused and thought of something. His gaze was like lightning as he looked at Meng Qi. Meng Qi, you'll also come with us. This time, Sect Master had taken away most of the sect's foundation establishment disciples. Those left in the sect were all disciples with lower cultivation levels. Elder Lu simply called the remaining foundation establishment disciples, a few Great Circle Qi refinement cultivators, and Meng Qi. They dispersed loudly and quickly returned to their rooms to pack up the things they needed. Most of these disciples had gone out to gain experience, so they weren't too flustered. Meng Qi was fine, but when she thought of Little White Tiger, she was a bit troubled. Little Qi was injured. She definitely couldn't bring him along. But she also didn't feel at ease leaving him in the sect. There was also Qin Xiumo. It would take at least half a month to sort out Qin Xiumo's chaotic spiritual aura due to qi deviation with the help of the Tranquil Heart pill. If she wanted to completely cure him, she still needed other medicinal pills. Forget it. She told him to stay near the cold pool and wait for her to return. Meng Qi made up her mind and was about to go out when there were 2 knocks on the door. Chu Tianfeng's voice sounded. Meng Qi, are you going to go with Elder Lu to provide support? Yes, Meng Qi replied casually. Open the door. Chu Tianfeng knocked on the door again. Meng Qi went forward and opened the door. Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiumo were standing side by side outside her door. Why are you here too? Meng Qi frowned and looked at Qin Xiumo, who appeared here arrogantly. I'm a good friend of Burning Sky Palace's young palatial master. Why can't I come? Qin Xiumo smiled. His gaze drifted over Meng Qi's shoulder and floated behind her. There, Little Qi was lying lazily on the bed. He put away his demon characteristics and looked no different from an ordinary spirit beast in the Trichilia chasm. It was just that he was still too young and was useless as a spirit beast now. Probably feeling Qin Xiumo's gaze, Little Qi raised its head and looked back at Qin Xiumo casually. The man and the tiger looked at each other across Meng Qi from afar. Qin Xiumo remembered that Chu Tianfeng said that this little white tiger was like Meng Qi's baby. Are you going to take him? He asked Meng Qi. I'm afraid it's not convenient. Meng Qi shook his head. Young palatial master Chu should have heard that there are demon cultivators involved this time. They should be quite powerful demon cultivators. Elder Lu is also injured. Raw Little Qi, who had barely made a sound after being brought back by Meng Qi, suddenly stood up from the bamboo bed. Yes. Meng Qi turned to look at Little Qi. Raw Little Qi cried again. He thought for a moment, then simply kicked his hind legs and pounced toward Meng Qi. Hey, be careful. Meng Qi quickly stepped forward and hugged Little Qi. Do you want to go? She asked a little uncertainly. Little Qi should have understood. He lay in Meng Qi's arms and tilted his head. Then, he seemed to be a little embarrassed and shyly stretched out his little paw and gently placed it on Meng Qi's shoulder. That look, it looked like he was acting coquettishly. Chapter 29. Meng Qi stared at Little Qi. The little white tiger lay in her arms, one of its furry paws pressing on her shoulder. His little head was slightly tilted to the side. Meng Qi happened to be able to see his small semicircular ears. When she looked over, she even swayed them slightly. Meng Qi had never seen Little Qi like this, and her heart instantly softened. She rubbed Little White Tiger's head and calmed down. Little Qi was still injured. It was too dangerous to bring him there rashly. No. Meng Qi shook her head. It's too dangerous. I can't bring you there. Little Qi seemed to make a low, thin sound. He rubbed his furry little head on Meng Qi's shoulder. This time, He was obviously acting coquettishly. Meng Qi, who could bear this? Bring him there. Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiumor looked at each other. The two of them quickly exchanged glances before Chu Tianfeng continued, I don't feel at ease staying here either. I've received news from Elder Zun that it's not that dangerous over there. It's just that the yarrow cultivators' sudden ambush caught them off guard. There are more injured people now, and we have to be distracted to guard against the demon cultivators' attack again, so we don't have enough people to treat them. Bring him there. Shouting. Cece his gaze paused on little Qi's face for a moment. It won't affect anything. Meng Qi pondered for a moment. Chu Tianfeng made sense. She was worried about leaving little Qi here. But how could she bring him there? Meng Qi hesitated. I have a beast house here. Chu Tianfeng took out a palm-sized thing from his storage bag and handed it to Meng Qi. The thing didn't look big, but it was heavy in her hand. It was a small cave-shaped thing. You can let him stay inside, you can put the beast house into your inventory bag, he continued. Bringing him around like this won't affect anything, okay? Meng Qi placed little Qi on the bamboo bed and took the animal hut to play with. She had heard of this before. There were many Xiuzhe who raised ling beasts in the 3,000 worlds. There was no way to put Xiuzhe or ling beasts in a storage bag. 1,000 years ago, there was a powerful cultivator who raised a spiritual cat. Because he spoiled that spiritual cat too much, he wanted to take it with him wherever he went, but he was unwilling to let his spiritual beast tire out. Thus, he spent a great deal of effort to create such a beast house. Once a spirit beast is placed in the beast house, it can be kept in a storage bag. This way, even when the spirit beast was still young and not strong enough, its master could bring it wherever he wanted. The beast house was not cheap because only cultivators above the spirit severing stage could make it. And he had to be a Xiuzhe who knew how to forge. Therefore, the most ordinary one would cost about 100 7th grade spirit stones. Meng Qi also thought about earning enough spirit stones and buying enough medicine. When they were about to leave the Cool Breeze Valley, she would grit her teeth and go to the heavens beyond heaven to buy a beast house. This way, it would be convenient to bring little Qi around. She looked carefully at the beast house that Chu Tianfeng gave her. It should be the most ordinary kind. How much is it? Meng Qi looked up at him. No need. Chu Tianfeng waved his hand. I'll give it to you. It was just a small thing. He wouldn't ask Meng Qi for money. He looked at Meng Qi happily and nodded. He was about to speak. Here. Meng Qi handed the beast house to Chu Tianfeng. She picked up little Qi again and prepared to hold him like this first. When she was resting, she would find a chance to go to the heavens beyond heaven to take a look and buy one. We should set off, Meng Qi said as she walked out of the door with little white tiger in her arms. Huh? Chu Tianfeng stared blankly at Meng Qi's back as she walked away, then looked at the beast house in his hands. Ha 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 ha. Qin Xiumor laughed happily. Didn't you notice? Meng Qi only wants to talk to you about money. Chu Tianfeng, of course he noticed. But what was Qin Xiumor laughing about? What are you laughing about? Meng Qi charged you more money, Chu Tianfeng sneered. When she detoxified me, she only gave me a few 6th grade spirit stones. She just wanted to show her sincerity. You. He looked Qin Xiumor up and down, and the smile on his face disappeared completely. It's very expensive. Meng Qi especially likes to talk to you purely about money. Qin Xiumor, you? Chu Tianfeng snorted coldly. He walked in the direction that Meng Qi left. He wouldn't tell Qin Xiumor that he had been angry at him for a long time because he had charged him more money. Now that he could use it to attack Meng Qi, he felt really good. Meng Qi. Chu Tianfeng took big strides and stuffed the beast house back into Meng Qi's hands. This thing costs 100 7th grade spirit stones, but you don't have to rush. You can take your time. Huh? He was about to say that there was no need to rush to give him the spirit stones. Meng Qi had already taken out 100 7th grade spirit stones and stuffed them into his hands. She took the beast house and carefully pulled out the bamboo scroll at the bottom of the beast house. It recorded the method to use the beast house and the things to pay attention to. Although it was refined for the convenience of carrying spirit beasts, Spirit beasts could only be kept in the most ordinary low-level beast house for 7 days at most. If they couldn't be let out after 7 days, the spirit beasts might suffocate and die because the spirit energy was too thin. The better the beast house, the longer the spirit beasts could stay in it. Of course, the price would be higher. Meng Qi held the jade scroll and slowly injected spirit energy into it. Her heart skipped a beat. She felt that she had already been bound to the beast house and could now see the situation inside clearly. Come. Meng Qi reached out to Little White Tiger and carefully approached it with the beast house. Little White Tiger seemed a little unwilling and used its little paws to poke at the beast house. But in the end, it didn't struggle. A faint light shone from the beast house and surrounded Little Qi. Then, it disappeared with a whoosh. Meng Qi held the bamboo scroll and saw a small bed with a soft cushion in the beast house that was shaped like a small cave. Little Qi stood in the middle of the cave. He looked around, then slowly walked to the small bed and lay down lazily. Meng Qi was relieved. She carefully put the beast house into her bracelet storage bag. The storage bag wasn't big and wasn't enough for her now. After this busy period, she was ready to change to a bigger storage bag. As for the medicine that Elder Lu asked her to bring, Meng Qi had already put it in her storage bag and didn't need to pack it up. Wait for me. Chu Tianfeng watched as Meng Qi put away Little White Tiger and walked forward without looking back. She didn't even have the intention to call out to him. He hurriedly followed her. Qin Xiaomo had also followed. His expression wasn't too good. He was still bothered by what Chu Tianfeng said just now about Meng Qi charging him more. Both of them had their own thoughts as they followed Meng Qi side by side towards the main hall of Cool Breeze Valley. The group of disciples that Elder Lu had gathered had all returned to the main hall. When Meng Qi entered, everyone's gaze subconsciously turned towards her. They naturally also saw Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiaomo following behind Meng Qi. The gazes of the disciples instantly became a little strange. Lu Qingran was also in the crowd. She looked at Chu Tianfeng, but the other party didn't even seem to bother to look at her. The other person, Lu Qingran, opened her small mouth in surprise. Wasn't that black-clothed man the man that junior martial sister Meng fished out of the cold pool? Wasn't he suffering from qi deviation and looked very serious? He recovered so quickly. Lu Qingran looked at Qin Xiaomo and couldn't help but look at Meng Qi. Junior martial sister Meng Qi was a qi refinement cultivator. Although her medical skills were outstanding, she was only 2nd grade, the same as her. Why could junior martial sister Meng do things that she couldn't do? Who exactly was she? Young Palace Master Chu. Elder Lu greeted Chu Tianfeng. He turned to look at Qin Xiaomo. This is, my friend. Chu Tianfeng raised his chin. In front of others, he was still that proud young Palace Master Gong of Burning Sky Palace. He heard that I was in trouble and specially came to help. Oh. Elder Lu looked at Qin Xiaomo suspiciously. Qin Xiaomo had a handsome appearance, but he looked a little vicious. And that gaze, he looked like a kind person at first glance. But he didn't say anything. Chu Tianfeng's identity was there. In the future, the entire Cool Breeze Valley, including himself, would be his subordinate. It wasn't his turn to question this kind of thing. Now that everyone had arrived, Elder Lu raised his hand and a small paper boat flew out of his sleeve. The paper boat landed on the ground and grew with the wind, finally turning into a big boat that could seat 30 people. The Cool Breeze Valley disciples followed Elder Lu onto the boat one by one. Last was Meng Qi. Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiaomo naturally walked beside her. Meng Qi didn't seem to be curious about Qin Xiaomo following her. As soon as she got on the boat, she quickly found a corner with fewer people, took out a bamboo slip from her storage bag, and began to read, just like before. Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiaomo looked at each other and stood not far in front of Meng Qi. They wouldn't get too close to her and make her unhappy. They stood there like 2 bodyguards, ensuring that no one would disturb her. A flying magic treasure like Cool Breeze Valley that could carry many people wasn't fast. This paper boat was already pretty good, but it still took a full day and night to fly to where the sect master and the others were. Before Elder Lu left, there had just been a battle here. There weren't many demon cultivators who sneaked into the Trichilia chasm this time, but they were all very skilled and cunning. Several sneak attacks were successful. If it weren't for Elder Zun Yang's timely protection, perhaps more than half of the Cool Breeze Valley disciples would have been killed. Fortunately, after a few attacks, Zun Yang gradually figured out the pattern of their sneak attacks and attacks. Under his leadership, the disciples of Cool Breeze Valley and Burning Sky Palace fought a beautiful defensive counterattack and finally injured a few demon cultivators. However, the disciples, including Elder Lu of Cool Breeze Valley, were all injured. Everyone was a little tired, so Zun Yang decided to rest here. He asked Elder Lu to go back and bring the disciples here to be responsible for treating and taking care of the injured. When Elder Lu went back, it only took half a day. At this time, it took another day and night to bring the 20 or so disciples here. Zun Yang and the others, who had consumed too much spiritual qi, had almost recovered, and the injured disciples had also been treated. As soon as the paper boat landed, Zun Yang and the sect master of Cool Breeze Valley greeted them together. Meng Qi put away the bamboo slip and followed the disciples off the boat. From beginning to end, she didn't talk to Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiumo. The disciples of Cool Breeze Valley who came with them on the boat were curious. The scene of Chu Tianfeng protecting Meng Qi and mercilessly scolding Lu Qingran in front of everyone that day was still vivid in their minds. These disciples used to talk about Meng Qi very enthusiastically. After discovering that Chu Tianfeng was protecting her, they were much more polite to her. What's more, there was also Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiumo, who looked very fierce at first glance, guarding by the side. No one dared to disturb Meng Qi along the way. Meng Qi looked at the bamboo slips that Xue Jinwen had given her along the way that recorded the medicinal herbs of the Northland. Seeing that they had arrived, Meng Qi hurriedly put away the things and followed everyone off the boat. Qing ran. When the sect master of Cool Breeze Valley saw his beloved disciple, he hurriedly waved at her kindly. "Why are you here too, Master?" Lu Qingran bowed to the sect master. She looked at her master, who had always doted on her, and her eyes turned red when she thought of what had happened in the past few days. "Master, disciple was so worried about you." Lu Qingran threw herself into the sect master's arms and sobbed. "Are you okay? What's wrong?" The sect master hurriedly patted her back and comforted her. "I'm fine, and I'm not injured. Don't be afraid. With Elder Zun Yang here, the demonic cultivators won't be able to take advantage of us." She paused and said, "Some of the disciples were injured, but they've already been treated. They'll be fine soon. Don't worry." "Woo woo." Lu Qingran nodded with red eyes and replied softly, "Yes." She revealed her true feelings. Compared to Meng Qi, who was so calm that he even seemed a little indifferent, she seemed much more pure and kind. At this time, there was no battle. Some of the disciples of Cool Breeze Valley who had just arrived also took the opportunity to go up and greet the sect master. While they were happy and harmonious, Chu Tianfeng had already walked to the side of his own sect's Elder Zun Yang. "What's going on?" he asked in a deep voice, his handsome eyebrows slightly wrinkled. Others didn't know, but Chu Tianfeng couldn't be more clear. He remembered that something similar had happened in his previous life. He even remembered the location of the demonic creature's nest that they had finally destroyed. Other than the demonic creatures, there were also some demonic cultivators. However, they were all stragglers and weren't much of a threat. If the people of Fantian Palace hadn't come to help at that time, Cool Breeze Valley might have been very miserable. Even the entire Cool Breeze town might have been slaughtered. However, at that time, Fantian Palace also sent people to help. Although the people who came couldn't compare to Elder Zun Yang's other two people, they also successfully destroyed the demons and resolved the crisis of Cool Breeze Valley. Demonic cultivators are cunning. Zun Yang shook his head with a wry smile. He turned his head to look at the happy and harmonious group of people of Cool Breeze Valley and furrowed his brows. To be honest, if it weren't for Chu Tianfeng's words, he wouldn't have thought much of the entire Cool Breeze Valley. Only that little disciple, Meng Qi, who was a little strange. When Zun Yang thought of this, he looked at Meng Qi, who was standing at the back of the Cool Breeze Valley disciples. She wasn't in a hurry to go up and curry favor with the sect master. Instead, she was looking around the surroundings. After a few unexpected sneak attacks, We figured out their pattern and didn't dare to attack for the time being. However, many people on our side were injured. Zun Yang shook his head and said in a low voice, "I'm ashamed." Chu Tianfeng didn't say anything. Where did those demonic cultivators come from? I'm not sure, but they're very familiar with this place. It's obvious that they've been here for a while. I tried to lead people to chase after them, but they quickly took advantage of the terrain to get away. The highest rank was only the Great Circle of the third stage, but they were very cunning. We really couldn't catch them. Chu Tianfeng nodded. He looked around. The place Elder Zun Yang chose had a wide field of vision. Although it wasn't easy to defend, it wasn't easy for the other side to launch a sneak attack either. They had a nascent soul elder overseeing them, while the other side's strongest was only equivalent to a great circle of the golden core. It was obvious that Elder Zun Yang had chosen this place after careful consideration. What about the injured? Chu Tianfeng asked again. Are there any of our disciples? There are 3 people. Cool Breeze Valley has more injured. After treatment, they're much better now. As Zun Yang spoke, he led Chu Tianfeng to where the injured disciples were resting. The people in Cool Breeze Valley were still chattering away, so he calmly turned his gaze away. It would be difficult for them to achieve great things. Zun Yang concluded in his heart. Especially that female disciple who'd clearly come to help but acted coquettishly towards her master as soon as she appeared. Fortunately, Zun Yang thought with relief. At first, he'd thought that the young palace master liked that girl. Fortunately, Elder Zun. Meng Qi saw Zun Yang and Chu Tianfeng walking side by side in another direction. She hurriedly followed and asked, "Are you going to see the injured?" She asked, "Can I come along?" Of course. Zun Yang looked at Meng Qi with increasing admiration. "Please come with me." Meng Qi silently walked with Zun Yang and the others to the tents where the injured were staying. The simple and crude tents that had been temporarily set up were quite spacious. 4 injured disciples lay inside each one. 11 of the Cool Breeze Valley disciples had been injured by the sudden attack of the yarrow cultivators. 2 of them were more seriously injured. 3 people from Burning Heaven Palace had also been injured, but their injuries weren't serious. Zun Yang was worried that the yarrow cultivators would return. If more people were injured, they'd be too busy to deal with it. Meng Qi followed them into the first tent. Inside were the 2 Cool Breeze Valley disciples who'd been more seriously injured. They were lying on the bed. Their wounds had already been treated, and their breathing had become more stable. They didn't seem to have any major problems. These 2 were injured by the same yarrow cultivator. Their injuries weren't serious, but that yarrow cultivator's weapon carried fire poison. After being injured, the 2 disciples rolled around on the ground in pain. Your sect master personally treated them, so they're sleeping better now. Meng Qi nodded. There were all kinds of fire poisons, but no matter what kind of fire poison it was, they all had a common characteristic. It would be very painful. That kind of pain was no less than repeatedly burning the wounded skin with a red-hot soldering iron. It was indeed difficult to endure. She glanced at the 2 disciples. With the sect master personally treating them, there shouldn't be any problems. The rest of the disciples aren't that seriously injured, Zun Yang said as he led Meng Qi and Chu Tianfeng to the next tent. Qin Xiumo had already followed them. He followed behind Meng Qi with a cold face. Zun Yang frowned and looked at him, but he didn't move at all. "Little friend Meng, he's my friend," Chu Tianfeng interrupted. "I see." Since he was the young palace master's friend, Zun Yang didn't ask any more questions. Meng Qi didn't even lift her eyelids. Apart from the treatment, she didn't care much about Qin Xiumo and Chu Tianfeng. Knowing was one thing. In any case, she was too lazy to care or think about it. She also didn't want to know how these 2 turned from enemies to friends. In the second tent were 3 female cultivators from Cool Breeze Valley. They indeed looked much more relaxed. When Meng Qi and the others entered, the 3 of them were sitting on their respective bamboo beds, chatting and laughing. Seeing them enter, the 3 of them quickly stood up and greeted everyone. The 3 of them aren't seriously injured. They've almost recovered, Zun Yang said. At that time, they were injured by a very strange weapon. It's a bit like. He thought for a moment and said, a tree branch. Chu Tianfeng nodded. Since they weren't seriously injured. Wait. Meng Qi suddenly walked quickly towards the three of them. She recognized one of the female disciples from Cool Breeze Valley. It was her senior martial sister Lan Zhuxian. Senior martial sister Lan, Meng Qi stood in front of Lan Zhuxian. Where are your injuries? Can you let me see? What? Zun Yang asked doubtfully. Little friend Meng, do you think there's a problem? Meng Qi didn't directly answer this question. She still wasn't sure if Lan Zhuxian and the others had been poisoned. When she came in, she felt a bit strange. There seemed to be a faint fragrance of a forest after the rain in the air. The smell was very faint. This was the wilderness, so many people didn't take it seriously. So she wanted to take a look at her injuries first. Lan Zhuxian looked at Meng Qi suspiciously. Her injuries? Was there a problem? But even the sect master said that her injuries were very light and that she would be fine soon. Meng Qi urged again, Senior Martial Sister Lan, please let me take a look at your injuries. Junior Martial Sister Meng Qi. Lan Zhuxian took a step back. Her eyes flickered as she looked at Meng Qi in surprise and uncertainty, then looked at Zun Yang and Chu Tianfeng behind her. There was also that cold-faced man in black who looked a bit fierce. Why did he want to see her injuries? Her injuries weren't serious, and the sect master said that she would be fine soon. Could it be that Meng Qi knew that she had spoken ill of her behind her back, so she took the opportunity to take revenge on her? The more Lan Zhuxian thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Otherwise, why would he only look at her injuries? My injuries are almost healed. Instead, she took a step back. The sect master said that I would be fine soon, so there's no need to trouble Junior Martial Sister. Meng Qi frowned. Before she could say anything, Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiumo had already walked up to her. They didn't do anything to Lan Zhuxian. Chu Tianfeng raised his chin at her. Let her see. Lan Zhuxian took another step back and looked at Chu Tianfeng in shock. She knew that ever since Meng Qi detoxified him, Chu Tianfeng had been very protective of her, his junior martial sister. So now, was Meng Qi deliberately bringing him to mess with her? Lan Zhuxian subconsciously wanted to retreat again. As soon as she moved, a cold sword was pressed against her waist. Qin Xiumo's sword was very cold, and his voice was even colder than the sword. Or do you want to show her another wound? Lan Zhuxian, two lunatics. She knew that she couldn't escape today. With the cold sword pressed against her, Lan Zhuxian's face turned pale. She didn't know that Qin Xiumo only looked fierce and scary, but in fact, he couldn't even beat a qi cultivator. Lan Zhuxian bit her lower lip and slowly rolled up her sleeves with trembling hands, revealing the wound on her upper arm. Meng Qi looked at Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiumo. In fact, she didn't really care what method she used to achieve her goal. Besides, Meng Qi also knew that Lan Zhuxian wasn't very friendly to her. Instead of wasting time explaining, it was better to be direct. She took a step forward and looked down at the wound on Lan Zhuxian's wrist. Meng Qi's expression changed slightly. It's really, she looked up at Lan Zhuxian and asked, Senior sister, after you got injured, do you feel that you're very thirsty and hungry? Do you always want to drink and eat? Lan Zhuxian nodded. Yes, a little. Ah, we're the same. When the other two female disciples in the tent heard this, they hurriedly came over and asked, Junior Sister Meng, how did you know? In the past 2 days, not only them, but 7 of the injured disciples also became very thirsty and hungry. The food and water they ate and drank in the past 2 days were already more than what they usually ate in a week. However, no matter how much they drank or ate, they didn't feel full or bloated. The sect leader came to take a look and didn't find any problems. He just guessed that it might be the sequelae of the injury. The 2 people didn't have any grudges with Meng Qi, so they immediately asked anxiously, Junior Sister Meng, what's wrong with us? Lan Zhuxian's face turned white and red. She still didn't believe that Meng Qi could discover the problem that even the sect leader couldn't detect. She was only in the qi refinement stage, and she entered the sect so much later than her. She couldn't be so powerful. Last time, she accidentally cured Chu Tianfeng. Maybe she was just lucky. At this moment, Lu Qingrant's voice came from outside the tent. Master, are the 3 injured senior sisters here? Disciple wants to go in and see them. Disciple has been worried about their safety all the way. The sect leader's voice also came. Let's go in together. They weren't seriously injured, and they're much better now. As soon as he finished speaking, the tent door was opened again. What happened? The Cool Breeze Valley sect leader didn't expect the situation in the tent to be like this. She first nodded to Zun Yang, then turned her gaze to Lan Zhuxian and Meng Qi and asked, "What happened?" Sect leader. Lan Zhuxian hurriedly put down her sleeves and said aggrievedly, "Junior sister Meng Qi thinks that our injuries haven't been cured. Disciple told her that sect leader personally treated our injuries, but she didn't believe me. She. As she spoke, she secretly glanced at Qin Xiumor. In any case, the sect leader was here. She didn't believe that Meng Qi could do anything in front of the sect leader. Chapter 30. Meng Qi turned to look at the Cool Breeze Valley's sect master. First, he had cured Chu Tianfeng, and then he had received an invitation from Elder Zun Yang of the Burning Sky Palace. Although she was still a little disciple who had entered the sect for more than half a year, she was slowly gaining some prestige. The Cool Breeze Valley's sect master looked at Meng Qi, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Meng Qi, do you think they've been poisoned?" Lan Zhuxian was stunned. She didn't expect the sect master to ask Meng Qi like this. She opened her mouth to speak, but Qin Xiumor's even colder gaze had already swept over. At this moment, Meng Qi nodded and said, "If I'm not wrong, there's a very strange demonic poison in the 3 senior sisters' bodies." Her tone was unhurried as she walked around Lan Zhuxian to the other 2 injured Cool Breeze Valley female disciples. "Senior sister." Meng Qi asked the injured female disciple, "Where's your injury?" "My calf." As the disciple spoke, he nimbly sat on the bed and rolled up his loose trousers, revealing a section of his fair calf. There was a palm-sized wound on the side of her calf that had already been treated. It had formed a scab, and even the scab was about to fall off. It didn't look as ferocious as when she was injured. "Senior sister." Meng Qi reached out and gently pressed on the wound. She looked up at the female disciple. "Was it a vine-like weapon that injured you?" "That's right." The female disciple was so excited that her voice rose. It was a vine-like weapon, and it looked no different from the ordinary vines in the forest. At that time, none of us noticed, and the vines suddenly jumped up from the ground and swept 7 or 8 of us down together. "Then there's no mistake." Meng Qi nodded, then asked, "Were there flowers on the vines?" "Yes." The female disciple nodded repeatedly. So it really looked like an ordinary vine, and no one paid attention to it. "Senior sister, did you notice the color of those flowers?" Meng Qi asked again. "This." The female disciple was a little hesitant. She turned to look at the other female disciple who was also injured by the vines and asked her, "Did you notice it, Fanchuan Tanshu?" "I saw a yellow flower." The female disciple thought about it seriously. "Yes, yellow. Now that you mention it, I also remember that it was indeed yellow." The female disciple from before also said, "And there were quite a few of them. I saw at least 3 or 4. Hearing that the flowers on the vines were yellow, Meng Qi was slightly relieved. "Did anyone else get hurt by the vines?" she asked again. "Yes." The female disciple nodded and looked at Lan Zhuxian hesitantly. Senior sister Lan was also injured by the vines. At that time, there were 2 Burning Sky Palace disciples and 2 senior brothers with us. They were all injured by the vines. Another female disciple added, "When the vines swept over, the disciples who were standing close to us were all swept down. Most of the wounds were on their legs." Meng Qi nodded. "Senior martial sister, please show me your wound." The other female disciple no longer had any doubts. This junior sister was clearly not at the scene, but she was able to accurately describe the shape of the thing that had injured them. She even knew that there were flowers on it. Without another word, she rolled up her pants and revealed the wound on her calf. The wound was also not deep and had already formed a scab. It looked like there was nothing to worry about. "Junior martial sister Meng Qi." The female disciple of Cool Breeze Valley raised her head and looked at Meng Qi eagerly. Is it very serious? This vine-like weapon is called the Divine Devouring Vine, Meng Qi said. It's a plant that only exists in the demon realm. Although it's a plant, after being nourished by spirit qi, it slowly has a bit of spiritual consciousness. It's just that it can't cultivate like a demon cultivator. Her tone was light, as if she was talking about something very normal. Everyone in the tent looked at Meng Qi. Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiumor looked at each other and exchanged a look that no one understood. Lu Qingran stood beside her master and looked at Meng Qi in a daze. She didn't know what to say anymore. Why does this junior martial sister, who entered the sect later than me, look like she knows everything? Lu Qingran instinctively reached out and held the Cool Breeze Valley sect master's arm, leaning her whole body against him. She always felt a bit afraid of Meng Qi like this. The sect master patted the back of her hand lightly to comfort her. Divine Devouring Vine? Zun Yang of the Burning Sky Palace pondered for a moment. I've vaguely heard people mention this thing before. I heard that the demon realm's heaven demon Crimson Fox race likes to refine it into weapons. He paused and said, but I've never seen such a weapon. Could it be? Elder Zun Yang's expression changed slightly. The ones who led the team to follow and ambush us are actually heaven demon Crimson Foxes? No wonder they're so cunning and can still keep their composure. I don't know, Meng Qi said. Sigh. Zun Yang sighed softly. He looked at Meng Qi and asked, then what's so special about this divine devouring vine? Only divine devouring vines that have grown for more than 100 years will be refined into weapons by demon cultivators. At that time, red flowers will bloom on the vine. Every 10 years, there will be one more flower. After 200 years, the color of the flowers will turn from red to orange. Similarly, every 10 years, there will be one more flower. After 300 years, the color of the flowers will turn yellow. If there are 4 or 5 flowers on the vine, then this divine devouring vine is 340 to 350 years old, Meng Qi said. Oh! Zun Yang looked at Meng Qi with interest. You're really experienced and knowledgeable. Cool Breeze Valley actually has such a talent. No wonder Heavenly Wind thinks so highly of you. The Cool Breeze Valley sect master blushed. She had never even heard of the divine devouring vine before. Not to mention discovering that her own disciple was actually injured by this thing. Meng Qi turned and carefully pointed at the wound on the calf of a Cool Breeze Valley female disciple. This wound looks very normal, but the reason why the divine devouring vine is called this is not because it's very sharp as a weapon. Instead, every time it injures someone, the pollen in the flower will take the opportunity to mix into the wound and enter the body through the flesh. That's why my senior sisters are always thirsty and want to drink water, she said. Next, the divine devouring vine's pollen will swallow the cultivator's spirit qi bit by bit. In the end, Meng Qi narrowed her eyes. The divine devouring vine will use the cultivator's body and spirit qi as nourishment and grow new vines on the cultivator's body. It will continue to absorb the spirit qi in the air and slowly grow. At the very beginning, the cultivator's consciousness is still considered clear, but the divine devouring vine has already merged with their flesh and blood, and it's impossible to expel it. Slowly, the cultivator will become weaker and weaker, and their consciousness will also gradually dissipate. Their body will become earth. Before Meng Qi could finish speaking, a female disciple suddenly screamed. Oh my God! Another female disciple's face also became extremely pale. Even though they were all medical cultivators, they had never thought that there would actually be such an evil thing in the world. It was simply using the cultivator's body as nourishment. Lan Zhuxuan's face also became pale. She did not want to believe Meng Qi. However, she had heard everything that this junior sister had said just now, so she had no choice but to believe her. You! Lan Zhuxian opened her mouth with difficulty and asked hoarsely, how did you know that I was injured by the divine devouring vine the moment you saw me? How did you know that I was poisoned by the divine devouring vine? To be precise, you were not poisoned. Meng Qi also did not change her attitude because of her. Her tone was still very calm. This is how the divine devouring vine reproduces. Other than cultivators, They will also devour the bodies of demon cultivators as nourishment to reproduce the next generation. War. The 3 injured female disciples suddenly turned sideways and started to vomit. They really could not imagine that their bodies would actually become nourishment for the vines. Furthermore, they had become nourishment while they were still alive. It was really chilling just thinking about it. Junior sister Meng Qi. After the other female disciple recovered from her shock, she rushed toward Meng Qi. It was as if she had grabbed onto her last life-saving straw. Since even the sect master completely could not tell that they were injured by the divine devouring vine, he also could not tell the origin of this divine devouring vine. Meng Qi knew that they could only rely on her to save their lives. I beg you, please save me. That female disciple anxiously held onto Meng Qi's hand and said anxiously, I have never said anything bad about you behind your back. Even when senior sister Lan went around saying that you were shameless to seduce young Empress Chu, I did not say anything bad about you like them. Really? She quickly said, you have to believe me. Me too. The other female disciple who had finally stopped vomiting also rushed over. Junior sister Meng Qi, I have never thought of you like that. I really admire you for being able to cure young Empress Chu. Really. I have never believed senior sister Lan's words. You too. Lan Zhuxian looked at the 2 of them in shock and anger. These 2 indeed did not say anything bad about Meng Qi. However, she was also injured. If they treated her like this, Meng Qi would definitely not save her. Thinking of the horrifying scene that Meng Qi had described, Lan Zhuxian's legs turned to jelly. She stood on the spot with a pale face, her lips moving, not knowing what to say. Meng Qi would definitely not save her. She would watch as she became the nourishment for those damn vines, become that horrifying appearance, and then laugh at her. She would definitely do that. Lan Zhuxian turned to look at the sect master in despair, hoping that he would say something now. At least for the sake of being from the same sect, let Meng Qi save her too. Meng Qi. The Cool Breeze Valley sect master spoke. Since you know about the divine devouring vine, do you have a way to save your 3 senior sisters? She paused and asked again, also, how did you guess that your senior sisters were injured by the divine devouring vine the moment you saw them? There is the unique smell of the divine devouring vine in the tent where the senior sisters are recuperating, Meng Qi said. I smelled it the moment I entered. When senior sister Lan came over, the smell became stronger. It was especially obvious when she spoke, Meng Qi said. That's why I asked if they were thirsty and always felt hungry. Yes. The 2 female disciples did not care about being reserved and nodded furiously. Also, no matter how much they eat or drink, they will not feel full. That's right. Meng Qi nodded. Junior sister Meng Qi. The 2 of them looked at her. Then, can we still be saved? If there are indeed only yellow flowers on the vines, we can try, Meng Qi said. Yellow flowers. I'm sure it's yellow flowers. The Cool Breeze Valley female disciple said, Senior brothers, 2 of our fellow Taoists from the Burning Sky Palace were also injured by this thing. We can ask them. I'll call them over. The Burning Sky Palace disciple guarding the door saw that the situation was serious and hurriedly ran out. Soon, the 4 other disciples who were also injured by the divine devouring vine in the other tent were called over. At first, they were still a bit confused. Weren't they just superficial wounds? Weren't they almost healed? However, after hearing Meng Qi's simple explanation, their expressions changed. I remember. One of the Burning Sky Palace disciples was still calm. He carefully recalled. There were 6 flowers on the vine. That's right. He said confidently, at that time, I even fought with that vine and burned it with fire. At that time, I also felt that it was very strange. Clearly, that vine was being used as a weapon. When I burned it, it was like a person who was scalded, and the top of it rose up. I saw that there were a total of 6 yellow flowers on it. Junior sister Meng Qi. The injured Cool Breeze Valley female disciple looked at Meng Qi worriedly. 6 flowers, is that okay? Yes, as long as it's confirmed that it's yellow flowers, we can try, Meng Qi said. Meng Qi. The Cool Breeze Valley sect master looked at the youngest female disciple in her sect. She had only entered the sect for half a year. Although Elder Yang had praised her for being extremely talented in medical skills, but wasn't this talent too terrifying? Before, being able to cure Chu Tianfeng's poison was already shocking and suspicious. Now, she could even recognize the name of something from the Yarrow realm that even she had never heard of. The sect master looked at Meng Qi with some uncertainty. She had never felt that this female disciple of her sect was so unfamiliar. It was no wonder that Qing Ran had suspected that she was related to demons. Now, even she was a bit suspicious. Was Meng Qi, the Cool Breeze Valley sect master's eyes flickered. She had just stared at Meng Qi for a moment. Chu Tianfeng, who was standing on the right side of Meng Qi, took a step forward and turned his body to the side. With a careless movement, he blocked her behind him. That appearance was clearly protecting Meng Qi. Qin Xiumo, who was standing on the left side of Meng Qi, was even more direct. He was a dual cultivator of sword arts and had reached the peak of Jindan at a young age. His cultivation was even above the Cool Breeze Valley sect masters. At this time, although he was suffering from qi deviation and the spirit energy in his body was still in a mess, even a qi refinement cultivator could defeat him now. However, his natal longsword was still by his side, and the level 6 meditation pill he had taken was also not ordinary. In addition, Meng Qi had helped him tidy up his spirit energy these 2 days. Although it was still in a mess, if he really wanted to fight with his life, even the Cool Breeze Valley sect master would not be his match. Qin Xiumo waved his hand, and his natal long sword, which had long been connected to his mind, floated in front of him. The tip of the sword was cold. It pointed directly at the Cool Breeze Valley sect master. As long as the other party dared to touch Meng Qi, he would protect her even if he had to risk his life. The Cool Breeze Valley sect master, what did she do to her? Meng Qi turned to look at the sect master. The reason she knew so much about the divine devouring vine was that it was indeed the favorite weapon of the red fox race in the Yarrow realm. The talkative white fox Su Junmo was injured by this thing. Of course, the thing that could injure Su Junmo was the divine devouring vine that had grown for almost 700 years. After he was injured, he was completely unable to expel the pollen that had invaded his body. This thing was like the spores of a fungus. Once it entered his body, it instantly spread all over his limbs and organs. When Meng Qi met Su Junmo, he was already very weak. However, no matter how weak he was, he should not be talkative. Squeak, squeak, squeak. He spat out the whole story of the divine devouring vine, the feud between the red fox race and the white fox race, and even the method of refining the divine devouring vine. Not only that, but Meng Qi also knew everything about the red fox race and the white fox race, from the lover of the clan leader to the most beautiful young lady among the white foxes. At that time, she had also never seen something like the divine devouring vine, let alone Su Junmo's injuries. At that time, Meng Qi was full of energy. He resisted the talkative fox's demonic voice and pulled him back from the brink of death. The process was very difficult. Whenever she recalled it, she would always sigh. It was also because of this that when she entered the tent, she smelled that strange floral fragrance that was similar to green tea. At that time, Meng Qi had smelled it for 3 whole months. It was impossible for him to be wrong. Fellow Daoist Meng. A Burning Sky Palace disciple who had also been injured by the divine devouring vine asked directly, "May I know what we can do?" After all, he was from the Burning Sky Palace and had seen many storms. He had the chess cards of a large sect's disciple, so he looked much calmer than the Cool Breeze Valley disciple. Although we feel thirsty and hungry easily now, the use of spirit qi is not affected. Fellow Daoist, if you have any instructions, please tell us. I need these herbs. Meng Qi took out a bamboo scroll and quickly wrote down the names of the herbs he needed. These can be bought at the Cloud Immortal Pavilion. I'll have to trouble Sect Master and Elder Zun Yang to help me find them. Other than that, I also need the blood of the 5 elements green crane. Okay. That Burning Sky Palace disciple respectfully took the bamboo scroll and handed it to Elder Zun Yang with both hands. Zun Yang held the bamboo scroll and nodded. These herbs are not a problem. But the blood of the 5 elements green crane. He paused and said, then we can only hunt the 5 elements green crane. This was one of the rare birds that could be seen in the eastern border of the 3000 worlds. It was not difficult to find. It was possible to find this 5 elements green crane in the forest where they were now. Zun Yang did not even ask Meng Qi what he needed these herbs for, nor did he have any intention of asking the Cool Breeze Valley sect master for help. He directly handed the bamboo scroll to his disciple and instructed him to buy the herbs he needed. Which one of you knows the heart-shattering curse? Meng Qi asked again. The Burning Sky Palace disciples did not respond. The injured Cool Breeze Valley disciples all raised their hands. Me. I know. Me too. Even Lu Qingran weakly replied, I know how to do it too. This was one of the spells that medical cultivators would learn. Most of the Cool Breeze Valley disciples knew how to cultivate it. This spell was one of the offensive spells unique to medical cultivators. It could directly hit the opponent's heart, and its power was quite strong. However, it had high requirements for cultivation. Using it once would basically use up more than half of one's spirit chi. Xiuzhe would learn it to protect themselves, but rarely used it against enemies. Realm 3 and above, Meng Qi said lightly. The Cool Breeze Valley disciples all shook their heads. Lu Qingran's face reddened. She knew it. So why did she say she knew it? When Meng Qi had asked for the meditation spell earlier, he had also looked down on her meditation spell that was only at Realm 1. She should have guessed that the other would ask for a high-level heart-shattering curse this time. This time, even the Cool Breeze Valley sect master shook his head. She knew it too, but even her heart-shattering curse was only at Realm 1, and had not broken through to Realm 2. Meng Qi shook his head. Then I can only go myself. Shamai Meng Qi, can I ask what the heart-shattering curse is used for? Lu Qingran asked in a small voice. It needs the blood of the 5-element green crane that is killed by the heart-shattering curse, Meng Qi said. But the problem now was that she needed a 3rd-grade 5-element green crane. She was a Lianqi Xiuzhe. Even if she cultivated the heart-shattering curse to Realm 3, she would not be able to hit the 5-element green crane. Chu Tianfeng saw the hesitation on her face and guessed what she was troubled about. He hurriedly said, I have a way. Oh. Meng Qi looked suspiciously at him. I have a way to temporarily raise your cultivation so that you can temporarily use the power of a Jindan stage cultivator to cast spells. Although you can only raise the spell once at a time, if we try a few more times, we will succeed. Chu Tianfeng looked fawningly at Meng Qi. When he said we, his tone even became slightly excited. Zun Yang shook his head slightly in amusement. He knew what method Chu Tianfeng was talking about, but this was a secret of Burning Sky Palace. Other than the young palace master, only disciples who had made great contributions had the opportunity to be taught. Now he was using it to curry favor with a Lianqi Xiuzhe. He wondered if the old palace master would be angered half to death after hearing about it. However, Zun Yang's gaze swept over Meng Qi's calm and composed face. If it was Meng Qi, it was not impossible. If Burning Sky Palace had such a mistress in the future, it might just make up for the young palace master's slightly impetuous personality. It was also a good thing. But Meng Qi still wanted to say something. Chu Tianfeng hurriedly interrupted her. No buts. Burning Sky Palace also has disciples who are injured. I should do something for them. All right. Meng Qi nodded. She was also straightforward and did not continue to be entangled on this issue. Then, let's split up. Young Palace Master Chu and I will hunt the 5-element green crane. As for the rest of the herbs, I will ask Elder Zun and the sect leader to help prepare them. Oh right. Meng Qi suddenly remembered. Her gaze swept over the injured male disciples one by one. These people, Meng Qi actually did not know if they would have any interactions with Lu Qingran in the future. Forget it. Safety first. I will collect money for the treatment. Meng Qi said unhurriedly. For each male cultivator, she quickly calculated the spirit stones that she should collect. Although this matter was troublesome, she did not know how to do it back then. Now that she knew the method, it was actually not as complicated as treating Chu Tianfeng back then. Moreover, ordinary disciples did not have many spirit stones, and they did not seem to be very familiar with senior sister Lu Qingran. Meng Qi thought for a moment and said, 300 4th-grade spirit stones per person. Chu Tianfeng had been nervously staring at Meng Qi. When he heard 4th grade spirit stones, he did not hear clearly that there were hundreds of them in front. He suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. If even a few ordinary disciples were worth more than him, the young palace master, he really should just jump into the cold pool and shut himself out. "I'll pay for them," Chu Tianfeng said straightforwardly. "I'll pay for the disciples of Burning Heaven Palace." Meng Qi glanced at him and nodded. "Let's go." As she spoke, she walked out of the tent. Chu Tianfeng hurriedly followed her. Qin Shomor then unhurriedly put away his natal long sword and leisurely followed them out of the tent. When he passed by the Cool Breeze Valley sect master, the corners of his lips curled up slightly. "You don't have to worry." Towards Cool Breeze Valley, Qin Shomor glanced at the sect master with some contempt and said in a lazy tone, "She has no interest and no intention. How can a sparrow know the ambition of a swan?" Qin Shomor's voice was not soft, and several people standing around the sect master heard him. Lu Qingran had seen him before and knew that it was Meng Qi who saved him. Her lips just moved, wanting to say something. Qin Shomor had already strode out of the tent and chased after Meng Qi. The tent was silent, and even Zun Yang didn't seem to want to say anything. He led the disciples of Burning Heaven Palace away and went to deal with the medicinal herbs. Only a few people from Cool Breeze Valley were left in the tent. Lan Zhuxuan's face was pale. She walked to the sect master in a panic and asked repeatedly, "Sect master, why did Meng Qi only say how much male cultivators cost? Is she not planning to save us? Sect master, does junior martial sister Meng Qi really not plan to save us?" The other 2 female disciples also panicked. "Is it because we live with senior martial sister Lan? Does junior martial sister Meng Qi hate senior martial sister Lan for speaking ill of her behind her back and suspecting her, so she's taking her anger out on us? It's all your fault. It was a matter of life and death." The 2 female disciples couldn't care about anything else and looked at Lan Zhuxian angrily. "Junior martial sister Meng Qi is so powerful, but you're not as good as her. It's fine if you're jealous of her, but why did you spread rumors about her everywhere? You even said that she shamelessly seduced the young palace master of Burning Heaven Palace. Don't you have eyes? It's obvious that young palace master Chu is chasing junior martial sister Meng." "That's right. It's fine if you want to die, but why do you have to drag us down with you? Woo woo. Sect master, junior martial sister Meng won't really leave us alone, right?" The tent instantly became noisy again, and the Cool Breeze Valley sect master's face became more and more unsightly. "Stop arguing." Her face turned cold, and her hands hanging by her sides clenched into fists. Qin Shomor's last words were still in her ears. She looked at these disciples who didn't have the temperament and panicked when something happened. Then she thought about how Meng Qi always seemed to be calm and composed. The Cool Breeze Valley sect master closed her eyes in disappointment. Before she could say anything, Yang Mingfeng's voice suddenly came from behind her. "Meng Qi won't leave you alone." He stood outside the tent and glanced at the disciples indifferently. "She will save you. Don't worry." In the forest that was getting farther and farther away from the tent, Qin Shomor had already caught up with Meng Qi and the others. He looked at the girl's calm side profile with great interest and asked, "You only accept spirit stones from a few male disciples. Do you not want to treat those female disciples?" Meng Qi looked at him in confusion. "Why not?" Qin Shomor was stunned. "That female disciple who insulted you is quite annoying. You don't want to save her, do you? If I can save her, of course I'll save her together. What are you thinking?" Meng Qi was even more confused. Should she say that he was indeed the little demon king? He actually thought that Lan Zhuxian deserved to die. However, senior sister Lan should also accept some spirit stones. She said, "She is indeed a bit noisy. Just find more things for her to do." Qin Shomor seemed to be choked. Chu Tianfeng almost burst out laughing when he saw his deflated look. Meng Qi ignored them and continued to walk forward. In the beast house in her storage bag, little Qi had already woken up. His pair of azure blue eyes were wide open as he quietly lay on the small bed in the beast house. He had already heard everything that happened just now. He even knew about the divine devouring vine. Not only that, but he also knew how to treat the divine devouring vine. Little Chi narrowed his eyes slightly. From the runes on the medicine knife, to the miniature version of the fire array used to refine pills, to the Dharma array, to the divine devouring vine, he was getting more and more curious about who exactly Meng Qi was. The little white tiger's eyes flashed, and a faint light flashed on its front paws. At the same time, on the highest floating island in Beyond Heaven, Su Junmo was walking around anxiously in a garden, muttering something under his breath. He walked faster and faster. Suddenly, a white light flashed in front of him, and a white-robed man appeared in front of him as if he had descended from the sky. "Master." Su Junmo hurriedly went forward and bowed respectfully. "Go to the east border," the white-robed man ordered calmly. "The largest crack in the barrier is in the east border." The Red Fox race even brought the divine devouring vine into the 3,000 worlds. A cold look flashed across his eyes. They deserve to die. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.